What's up? Ghost Fictions is here and we're back again. This is a story where Issei was the reincarnation of the moon-breathing Kokushibo. Issei is Kokushibo's reincarnation. But before we start, please consider subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. Don't forget to check the description for more informations. Now, let's get into part 1. Being the older brother of a sister who was talented at pretty much everything sucks. Whereas the sister would receive love, admiration, attention, the older brother would be left ignored, unwanted, unloved. This was particularly true in the case of Issei Haidu. His sister, Sarah Haidu, was the perfect child in every sense. Smart, beautiful, athletic, she was the dream child of every parent, whereas Issei himself was flawed in their eyes. With no particular talent to show off, Issei was considered subpar by his parents. The only ones who did see his suffering was his sister and young childhood friend Irina. Irina met Issei in a park when they were both 7. Issei's parents had gone out of the city with his sister for some national sports event, followed by an art exhibition, which left Issei alone at home. Being the young kid he was, he headed to the park after school, where he found his usual spot, the swing, being occupied by a young person with short brown hair and a wide smile upon their face as her father pushed her along. Issei saw this, imagining himself in the child's position. A small sad smile formed on his face before he aborted his plan to go to the park and headed home. It was then that the young brunette was approached by the other child, her father behind her. The young child before him beamed at him, before announcing herself. "Hi. I'm Irina. What's your name?" she asked happily. "I'm Issei." The boy replied. "Wanna play with me?" Issei looked at her dad. The older man looks down towards the young child, a small smile adorned his face. It was a friendly smile, not one of pride that his parents used for his sister, but one of care. "Go play with my daughter. I'm sure you two will make great friends," the man says before heading over to a bench at the edge of the park. Leaving his bag next to the bench the man was sitting on, Issei follows the bright young girl to the playground, where the two spent their next hour enjoying themselves. Issei laughed along with Irina, both thoroughly enjoying the time spent together. As it approached sunset, Irina's father decided it was time to head home, making Issei visibly upset. "Don't worry, we can play again tomorrow," Irina says brightly. Issei returns the smile and nods before waving goodbye to his new friend. Irina waves back before heading in the opposite direction, holding her father's hand. Every small gesture of affection from the older man to his daughter was caught on by Issei, from the smiles to the soft scolding to the hand holding. Grabbing his bag from the seat, Issei starts his small trek home. On the trek, small thoughts pop into his mind. Thoughts that should not be going through a young boy's mind. What does it feel like to hold someone's hand? What does it feel like to be cared for? What does it feel like to be loved and wanted? The young boy stood in front of the house that he called home. Opening the door, Issei was greeted by a silent dull hallway. Closing the door softly behind him, a small click was heard as he locked it. Taking off his shoes, Issei walked down the corridor into the kitchen. On the table was a simple meal he made for himself in the morning. After putting the meal in the microwave to heat up, Issei went to the bathroom to take a short shower. Inside, thoughts swelled around within his mind. Does anyone actually care about me? Was that girl, Irina I think she was called, was she just being nice to me? Issei quickly finished his shower, drying himself and getting changed. As he was getting changed, he sees the signs of neglect upon his body. Skinny, bony, not much color on his skin. After putting on his clothes, albeit slightly tattered, he returned to the kitchen to find his microwaved food, still warm. Setting it down on the table, he turns off the kitchen light and turns on the light for the dining room. "Thanks for the food," he says to himself before eating. After finishing, he washes the cutlery and dishes before retiring to his room with his school bag. Taking out his homework, he completes it quickly before going to bed, the only place where he can truly be happy. Issei's mindscape. In the depths of Issei Haidu's subconscious, a strange sensation pulled him into an unfamiliar realm. The air was thick with an ancient energy, and he found himself standing in a vast eerie structure that seemed to stretch into eternity, the Infinity Castle. Its dark twisting corridors and shifting architecture played tricks on his eyes, making it hard to discern reality from illusion. "Where am I?" Issei muttered, feeling both curious and unnerved. His mind raced as he tried to recall how he had ended up in this bizarre place. As he wandered through the labyrinthine hallways, the oppressive atmosphere seemed to press in on him. The castle's dim lighting cast long shadows, creating an otherworldly ambience. Suddenly, he heard a deep resonant voice echo through the corridor. "Welcome Issei Haidu." Issei turned quickly, his eyes widening as he saw a tall, imposing figure emerge from the shadows. The man had long, flowing hair and striking, heterochromatic eyes, one a deep crimson, the other a vibrant purple. His presence exuded a mixture of power and menace. "Who are you?" Issei asked, his voice steady despite the growing tension. The figure stepped closer, revealing the intricate patterns of his kimono and the unmistakable aura of a warrior. "I am Kokushibo," he replied, his voice calm yet commanding. "And you, Issei, are my reincarnation." Issei's mind struggled to process the revelation. Reincarnation? What are you talking about? Kokushibo's eyes bore into Issei's, filled with a mix of ancient wisdom and lingering sorrow. "Long ago, I was a powerful demon, a member of the 12 Kizuki. My life was filled with battles and bloodshed. However, in my final moments, I realized the futility of my path. I sought redemption, and in doing so, my soul was reborn in you." Issei's mind reeled with the weight of Kokushibo's words. "So, what does that mean for me?" Kokushibo's expression softened slightly. "It means that within you lies untapped potential, power that you have yet to awaken. I am here to guide you, to teach you the ways of the sword and the mind, so that you may surpass your limits and protect those you care about." A mix of determination and curiosity flared within Issei. "Alright, if you can help me become stronger, then I'll learn from you." Kokushibo nodded approvingly. "Very well. Our training begins now." The castle shifted around them, transforming into a vast open training ground. Kokushibo drew his katana, its blade gleaming with a deadly precision. "First, you must learn to control your breath, to harness your inner strength." Issei mirrored Kokushibo's stance, feeling the weight of the sword in his hand. As they moved through the forms and techniques, he felt a connection growing, a bond that transcended time and space. Kokushibo's teachings were rigorous, pushing Issei to his limits, but he persevered, driven by the desire to become strong. Days turned into weeks, and Issei's skills improved remarkably. He learned to channel his energy, to strike with precision and power. With each passing day, he grew closer to understanding the depths of his reincarnated soul. One evening, as they stood in the training ground, Kokushibo looked at Issei with a rare smile. "You have done well, Issei. Remember, the strength you seek is not just in your sword, but in your heart. Protect those you cherish, and you will never falter." Issei nodded, feeling a newfound sense of purpose and confidence. "Thank you, Kokushibo. I won't let you down." As the Infinity Castle began to fade, Issei felt himself being pulled back to reality. He woke up in his room, the memories of his training vivid in his mind. He knew that, with Kokushibo's guidance, he was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. After his intense training with Kokushibo in the depths of his subconscious, Issei Haidu made a momentous decision. He left his home without a word, vanishing into the world to continue his training. Issei sought to master the moon breathing technique that Kokushibo had taught him, and he knew he had to do it on his own. For years, Issei wandered the world, honing his skills and pushing his limits. His dedication was unwavering as he practiced day and night, learning to harness the full potential of moon breathing. He grew stronger, his movements more precise and lethal with each passing day. Years had passed since Issei Haidu's surreal encounter with Kokushibo in the depths of his mindscape. The lessons he had learned in the Infinity Castle remained etched in his memory, guiding his every move. Determined to harness his newfound abilities, Issei dedicated himself to mastering the art of moon breathing, the sword techniques imparted to him by his ancient mentor. In the real world, Issei trained relentlessly. He honed his skills with unwavering focus, his sword slicing through the air with the precision and grace of a seasoned warrior. Each day, he pushed himself to his limits, channeling the power of his reincarnated soul into his training. During this time, Issei also encountered Drag, the Red Dragon Emperor, who revealed the existence of the supernatural world. He learned about the complex hierarchies of devils, fallen angels, and other mystical beings that inhabited the shadows of society. The revelation fueled Issei's desire to become stronger, to protect the innocent from the dangers lurking in the darkness. Driven by a sense of purpose, Issei embarked on a mission to hunt down stray devils and fallen angels who posed a threat to humanity. With each encounter, he gained valuable experience, his combat skills sharpened by the intense battles he faced. His reputation as a fearsome warrior began to spread throughout the supernatural world. However, Issei's relentless pursuit of justice did not go unnoticed. His appearance, strikingly similar to Kokushibo's, because of that Issei became a symbol of fear among his enemies. The supernatural community whispered of a dangerous figure, an unknown warrior, whose mere presence sent shivers down their spines. They knew nothing of his name, only the terror he brought upon those who dared to cross his path. They call him the Moon Slayer. Clad in dark robes, with heterochromatic eyes gleaming with an otherworldly intensity, Issei's transformation was complete. His hair, long and flowing, added to his enigmatic aura. He moved through the shadows like a specter, his every step calculated and purposeful. The supernatural world was in turmoil. Stray devils and fallen angels lived in fear of the mysterious warrior who hunted them relentlessly. Whispers of his deeds reached even the highest echelons of power. Leaders of various factions convened, desperate to uncover the identity of this formidable adversary. One evening, as Issei walked through a moonlit forest, he sensed a presence approaching. He stopped, his hand instinctively resting on the hilt of his katana. From the shadows emerged a figure, an emissary sent by a powerful devil faction. "Who are you?" the emissary demanded, trying to mask his fear with bravado. Issei's eyes bore into the emissary's soul, his voice calm yet laced with an underlying menace. "I am a guardian of humanity, a hunter of those who threaten the innocent." The emissary trembled, recognizing the danger he faced. "Why do you hunt us? What do you seek?" Issei's grip tightened on his sword. "I seek to protect. To rid the world of those who prey on the weak. You have brought this upon yourselves." With a swift fluid motion, Issei drew his katana, its blade reflecting the pale moonlight. The emissary barely had time to react before Issei struck, his movements a blur of lethal precision. The emissary fell, a testament to Issei's unyielding resolve. As the forest grew silent once more, Issei sheathed his sword and continued on his path. His journey was far from over. The supernatural world might not know his name, but they would come to understand the force of his will, the power of his convictions. Issei Haidu, guided by the teachings of Kokushibo and driven by the legacy of Drake, would become a legend, a guardian whose very presence heralded the dawn of a new era of justice. The orc and SCPR on the ground looked beat up and unable to fight back. Sarah gripping her hands tightly, blaming herself that she wasn't strong enough to stop Kokushibo. Kokushibo's triumphant laughter echoed through the dimly lit chamber as he stood amidst his followers, the air thick with anticipation and malice. "I've won. The war between the three factions will begin anew, and I will be the catalyst," he declared with an arrogant smirk, confident that his plans to ignite a war among the factions of the supernatural world were finally coming to fruition. As Kokushibo raised his hand to summon a spear of light, but just as he was about to kill Sarah with his light spear, the air grew heavy, and time seemed to slow. Kokushibo's eyes widened in shock. Why is it sudden change of atmosphere? Everyone thought except Kokushibo. What is this chilling presence I'm feeling, Kokushibo thought. His hand was cut off by a figure materialized beside Kokushibo with an aura of calm resolve. It was Issei Kokushibo, his heterochromatic eyes gleaming with resolve. Kokushibo was too frightened to scream in pain. Kokushibo turned his head hesitantly to the right, sensing something amiss, only to find himself looking at the figure that appeared to his side with that seemed to materialize out of thin air. Kokushibo's eyes widened in shock and disbelief. "Who?" Before he could ask, his wings were sliced cleanly off, leaving him to collapse to the ground in agony. Kokushibo. "You have gone too far," Kokushibo said calmly, with pressure making Kokushibo shake a bit, his gaze locked on Kokushibo with unwavering intensity. In that moment, everyone who had infiltrated Kokushibo's inner circle felt a chill run down their spine. Everyone had heard whispers of a formidable figure known only as the Moon Slayer. A mysterious warrior who appeared out of nowhere in the supernatural world. Everyone watched in awe and shocked as the figure effortlessly cut Kokushibo's wings with such speed that it looked like he didn't even move. Kokushibo staggered on his knees while holding his cut-off hand, blood staining his robes as he realized the depth of his mistake. "Impossible. Who the hell are you?" he gasped, his voice choked with pain and disbelief. Issei remained quiet and was about to cut his head clean, but was interrupted by a kick with white armor about to hit his face, but Issei's was able to block it easily, the sound of a powerful clash between a kick and a blade. After a few seconds, the mysterious figure in armor jumped back a few meters away and narrowed its eyes at Kokushibo. "Wait a minute, that's the White Dragon Empress, Vali," Sona said out loud. The mysterious figure presence made itself known. Vali Lucifer, the White Dragon Empress, her eyes narrowing at the sight of Kokushibo's defeat. "So you know who I am, Sona Citri?" Vali questioned as shifted her attention to the devil heiress. "Of course we know who you are this generation's White Dragon Empress, however the real question is, what on earth are you doing here?" Sona questioned. "Simple, my objective is to retrieve Kokushibo before he gets himself killed," Vali stated, and now turned her attention back to Kokushibo. "And it seems I was just in time." "Hey you," Vali said as she locked eyes with Issei. "You've meddled where you shouldn't have. Kokushibo was to be brought in alive." Issei met her gaze evenly, his expression unreadable yet filled with determination. Kokushibo's actions were a threat to the balance. Issei stated calmly. Vali said, her voice cold and calculating. "My mission is to retrieve Kokushibo alive, so I can't let you kill him." Vali lunged at Issei, her speed and power impressive. She aimed a kick at him, hoping to catch him off guard. Issei blocked the attack effortlessly. Vali is Jayame and her throw punch and kick, while Kokushibo is blocking and parrying her attack with his blade. Vali's balance breaker armor gleamed as she launched a series of rapid strikes at Issei. He parried each one with ease, his movements fluid and controlled. The battle raged on, the ground beneath them cracking and shattering under the force of their blows. Despite Vali's formidable strength, she used her divine dividing, Divi. But before she could even use it, Issei was upon her, his katana poised for the final strike. Issei breath in moon breathing, first form, dark moon. Evening Palace Kokushibo swiftly swing his katana in a singular horizontal motion in a crescent / in front of Volley. The strike connected with Volley's armor, creating a crack that sent her flying backward. Volley crashed to the ground, her armor shattered and her body bruised. For a moment, she lay still, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Then, with a groan, she deactivated her balance breaker, her armor dissipating into the ether, revealing herself without the armor. Volley struggled to rise, her eyes locked onto Issei's with a mixture of respect and frustration. She prepared to use divine dividing again, but before she could activate her power, Issei stood over her, his expression unreadable. And she knew she had been outmatched. Issei stood over her, his expression unreadable. "Your mission is over," he said, his voice carrying a note of finality. Volley struggled to her feet, her pride wounded more than her body. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice hoarse. Issei looked at her, his eyes reacting a lifetime of battles and loss. "You may call me Kokushibo," he said simply, sheathing his sword. "Remember that name." Without another word, he turned and vanished into the night, leaving Volley and the remnants of the battle behind. Time skipped to the meeting of the three factions for peace. The Grand Hall of Kuo Academy was filled with a palpable tension as representatives from the three factions, angels, fallen angels, and devils, gathered to discuss the terms of a historic peace treaty. The leaders stood at the center, surrounded by their respective entourages. At the head of the assembly, Surzich's Lucifer, the Devil King, exuded an air of calm authority. Beside him, Michael, the leader of the angels, radiated a serene and composed presence. Opposite them stood Azazel, the leader of the fallen angels, whose eyes gleamed with a mix of curiosity and cautious optimism. Surzich's Lucifer stepped forward, his voice calm and authoritative. "Thank you all for coming. Today, we stand on the precipice of a new era. An era of peace and cooperation. The war has brought nothing but suffering and loss to all our factions. It is time to end the cycle of violence." Michael nodded in agreement. "The time for war is over. We must work together to protect this world from greater threats." Azazel smirked, his eyes glinting with mischief. "Finally, something we all agree on. Peace is within our grasp if we can set aside our differences." As the leaders discussed the terms of the treaty and Azazel apologizing for Kokushibo's actions, a sense of hope began to fill the room. The representatives of each faction listened intently, their eyes reflecting the desire for a better future. After a few minutes of negotiation, the three leaders finally came to an agreement. "It is settled, then," Surzich's declared. "From this day forward, our factions will work together to ensure the peace and prosperity of our worlds." As the leaders discussed the terms of the peace agreement, a sense of hope began to fill the room. They spoke of mutual cooperation, shared responsibilities, and the importance of unity. However, the conversation soon shifted to a more pressing issue. Surzich's addressed the room, his expression serious. "There is one matter we must discuss. The mysterious figure known as Kokushibo. He has been causing significant disturbances in the supernatural world." Michael sighed, his expression thoughtful. "We have heard reports of his actions. He has hunted down stray devils and fallen angels with a ruthlessness that is both impressive and concerning." Surzich's nodded. "His appearance and abilities are unlike anything we have seen before. He poses a significant threat, but he also seems to act with a certain code of honor." Azazel sighed, rubbing his temples. "We've tried to gather information on him, but he remains unknown. No one knows his true intentions. All we have are descriptions of his appearance. Long hair, heterochromatic 6 eyes, and a presence that strikes fear into the hearts of his enemies." Michael looked around the room, his eyes meeting those of the other leaders. "Is he a potential ally or a threat we must eliminate?" Before anyone could answer, Rhea stepped forward. "We encountered him recently. He saved us from Kokushibo. His power is immense, but he didn't harm us." Azazel crossed his arms and sighed deeply. "Yes, I almost forgot about that." "What do you mean, Azazel?" Michiel asked. "You see, when Kokushibo was about to kill Kokushibo, Volley here my adopted daughter to retrieve Kokushibo for me," Azazel said while glancing at Volley who was clenching her fist. "Kokushibo nearly killed Kokushibo, but Volley was able to come on time and stop him. Volley was nearly killed, but he showed mercy to her and told his name was Kokushibo and disappeared in thin air." Azazel looked at Volley. "Am I right?" "Yes, that what happened," Volley admitted while looking down. As Surzich was about to say something, he was interrupted by an explosion that rocked the building, and the atmosphere shifted from one of cautious curiosity to immediate danger. The old Satan faction, led by the remnants of those who oppose peace, launched a surprise attack. Explosions. Looked out a broken wall to see they were surrounded by thousands of these hooded figures. They were all hovering around the school building, which seemed to be fixated in a fake alternative Tokyo, as the sky seemed to be multicolored, with it occasionally changing from red to purple to green to blue, and the surrounding areas were completely stripped of pedestrians and human life. Everyone looked up from the broken wall to see a tall bespectacled woman with a voluptuous figure hovering just in front of the hooded figures, smirking arrogantly at the leaders of the three faction. Kateria Leviathan, what brings you here? Surziches questioned with hateful eyes. To bring an end to your atrocities, what kind of devils side with the enemy? You and Seraphol have brought shame to the name and legacy of the original Lucifer. Judging by their numbers, it looks like we all gonna need to work together to get out of this situation. Azazel said as stretching his neck to get the blood flowing. Sigh. It looks like it. Will all of you that have some combat experience please join us outside? Michiel said as he and Gabriel flew out the window and into the battlefield. Riaz, Son, rally up the members of your peerages, we gonna need as much help as we can. Surziches ordered as he as well as Seraphol followed Michiel and Gabriel to battle. Well, looks like we up as well, you ready? Azazel questioned. I'm always ready for a good fight. Penemu responded with a cheeky grin. Azazel chuckled, well, let's go. The rest of the devils proceeded to leave the room in order to rally up their comrades. Rooftop of a building. Issei stood atop the rooftop, observing the chaos below with an unflinching gaze. Watched the unfolding events with a calm and calculated demeanor. His heterochromatic eyes took in every detail of the skirmishes below. From his vantage point, he could see the leaders of the three factions fighting valiantly against the forces of the old Satan faction. He watched as Azazel clashed with Kateria Leviathan, their battle a fierce display of power and skill. The members of the Occult Research Club fought with determination, their combined efforts holding the enemy at bay. Issei shifted his gaze to his little sister Sarah, who was fighting bravely alongside her friends. A hint of pride flickered in his eyes as he observed her courage and tenacity. Despite the intense combat below, he remained motionless, his presence concealed from those engaged in the conflict. Partner, you noticed them, right? Drake questioned his host. Nod, I noticed them the moment they arrived. Issei responded in his thoughts with a calm tone. Well, you deal with that, partner, I'm going to sleep, the red dragon said before he went to sleep. Kokushibo. Volley called out, she and her group approached from behind, their footsteps barely audible. Volley stepped forward, her gaze fierce as she addressed Kokushibo. Volley's eyes flashed with a mix of anger and determination. She hadn't forgotten her defeat. Issei turned his head slightly, acknowledging their presence without fully turning around. What do you want, Volley Lucifer? Volley took a step forward, her team standing alert but non-threatening. I have a proposition for you. And what would that be? Issei asked with calm look on his face. From an organization called the Cows Brigade, as they have seemed to taken an interest in you. Who are this Cows Brigade you speak of? Simple, there are beings in that organization that can be a real threat to you, plus let's not forget Office is after you and I know you could sense how powerful she is. Volley said. And who are these beings that I should even fear this organization called Cows Brigade? Issei asked with a narrowed eyes. You will only get that information after you join me. Volley said while extending her hand to Issei for a handshake. Your offer is intriguing. Issei said, his voice calm and steady. But I have no need for your protection or your cause, I refuse your offer. Kuroka stepped forward, her usual playful demeanor evident. Are you sure, Naya? We could have some fun together, Naya. She said, winking at him. Baiko, standing next to Kuroka, added. Yeah, we could really use someone of your strength. Issei remained silent, his eyes looked back on the battlefield. Volley crossed her arms. You don't know what you're missing, Kokushibo. We could achieve great things together. Kuroka, with a mischievous glint in her eye, leaned in closer to Kokushibo. Hey, Kokushibo, have you ever thought about having a child, Naya? She teased, ending with her signature playful tone. Issei glanced at Kuroka, his expression unchanged. That is not something I am interested in. Kuroka pouted playfully. Too bad, Naya. You'd make a great father. She said, giggling. Volley sighed, realizing that convincing Kokushibo wouldn't be easy. Let's go. She said to her group. We have other matters to attend to. As they turned to leave, Kokushibo returned his gaze to the battlefield, his mind already drifting back to his own thoughts. Everyone has been fighting non-stop, and they started to slowly lose their stamina. Seraphol and Penemu were doing their best to protect Riaz, Sona and their peerages from the onslaught of attacks. They were able to take down a good amount of the demon and magician army, but for every one they took down, 6 or 7 would come to take their place. Heavy panting. This is really not looking good, Penemu said, trying her best to catch her breath. Heavy panting. Where are the other? Seraphol questioned. They are busy dealing with Kateria, Penemu stated with her collapsing to her knees from exhaustion. As Penemu collapsed to her knees, her body trembling from exhaustion, Seraphol gritted her teeth, forcing herself to stand tall, despite the burning fatigue in her limbs. The battlefield was a. Seraphol clenched her fists, her normally cheerful demeanor replaced with an expression of grim determination. She knew they couldn't hold out much longer at this rate. Their stamina was running low, their magic reserves were dwindling, and the enemy just kept coming. Penemu struggled to push herself up, her wings twitching weakly. Damn it. If this keeps up, we won't last much longer. Rias and Sona, along with their peerages, stood behind them, exhausted but still ready to fight. Their breathing was ragged and their bodies ached, but retreat wasn't an option. Not when their enemy sought to wipe them out completely. Just as another wave of enemies surged forward, a suffocating aura suddenly engulfed the battlefield. A chilling pressure that made even the demons and magicians pause in their tracks. A gust of wind swept through, carrying the scent of blood and steel. The shadows stretched unnaturally, as if the darkness itself was alive. Then, step. A single footstep echoed through the battlefield. Slow. Deliberate. The enemy forces turned, their expressions shifting from confidence to unease. Boom. A deafening shockwave erupted from above. The sky itself seemed to tremble as a shadowy figure plummeted from the heavens, landing in the center of the battlefield with an impact that cracked the very earth beneath him. Dust and debris exploded outward, forcing both ally and enemy to shield their eyes. Emerging from the darkness, a lone figure stepped forward, standing tall amidst the carnage. He was clad in dark robes with intricate patterns resembling the night sky. His long, wavy hair cascaded down his back, tinted with a deep violet hue. His piercing, six glowing eyes scanned the battlefield with an eerie calmness. A massive katana rested at his side, its blade gleaming ominously under the moonlight. A heavy silence followed. Then, from within the settling dust, a single figure stood. Tall. Ominous. Otherworldly. A long flowing dark kimono adorned with eerie patterns resembling a starless night draped over his form. His violet-tinted hair cascaded down his back, barely swaying in the wind. But what struck fear into those who gazed upon him were his six glowing eyes, each radiating an unnatural light that pierced through the darkness. The enemy forces froze. Even the most battle-hardened demons and magicians hesitated, their instincts screaming at them to run. Everyone is shaking in fear. Seraphil narrowed her eyes, gripping her wand tightly. What the hell is that? Penemu, still on her knees, felt her breath hitch. She had seen countless terrifying beings before, but something about him sent a primal chill down her spine. The figure stood motionless for a moment before slowly tilting his head, scanning the battlefield. His gaze landed on Seraphil, Penemu, Rias, and Sona's exhausted forces. Then shifted toward the enemy army. He sighed. Then, he moved. In a blink of an eye, he surged forward. Seemingly like he teleported. Slash. A single arc of his blade carved through the enemy lines, cutting down dozens in an instant. Their bodies collapsed before they could even react. The enemy's confidence shattered, replaced by sheer panic. What the hell is that thing? One magician screamed, scrambling backward. Fall back. Fall back. Another demon shrieked. Seraphil and Penemu could only watch in stunned silence as the unknown swordsman continued his massacre. Every movement was fluid, precise. Merciless. No wasted motion. No hesitation. It was like watching death itself move across the battlefield. And then, just as suddenly as he arrived, the swordsman came to a stop, his blade dripping with blood. He exhaled softly, shaking his head. Pathetic. He muttered. Nemu pushed herself up, still feeling the weight of exhaustion, but her mind was racing. Who was that? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. One of Ria's peerage members, Kiba, wiped the blood off his sword and spoke up. I've heard rumors about a warrior who appears on battlefields, cutting down enemies without mercy. No one knows who he is, only that he moves like a ghost in the night. He turned toward the others, his eyes serious. They call him the Moon Hunter. A heavy silence followed his words. The Moon Hunter. Sona repeated, adjusting her cracked glasses. That wasn't just any warrior. Whoever he was, he took out an entire wave of enemies in seconds. Not just that. Akeno added, her usual playful smirk absent. Did you see his eyes? There were 6 of them. Everyone exchanged uneasy glances. No normal being. Devil, angel, or fallen. Had such an appearance. Rias crossed her arms, deep in thought. If he's the Moon Hunter, then why did he help us? Maybe we were just in the way of his real targets. Kaneko murmured, still staring at the spot where the swordsman had stood. Seraphil exhaled sharply. Doesn't matter right now. We need to regroup and recover. We'll figure out what to do about the Moon Hunter later. As the group gathered their wounded and prepared to leave, Rias stole one last glance toward the night sky. The battlefield was painted with blood, the ground cracked and scorched from endless battles. The air reeked of iron and burned flesh. Azazel stood nearby, his golden eyes locked onto Kateria Leviathan, but something changed. She wasn't even looking at him anymore. Her entire focus was now on him. Kokushibo. The 6-eyed swordsman stood motionless, his tall, ominous figure exuding an unnatural stillness. His long violet-tinted hair barely swayed despite the wind that howled across the field. The battlefield fell silent. Kateria Leviathan's piercing violet eyes locked onto the six-eyed swordsman. A deep primal fear coiled around her chest, her instincts screaming at her in ways they never had before. She had fought gods, devils, and dragons. She had stared death in the face countless times. But this was different. Kokushibo stood still, his massive katana resting at his side. He did not radiate bloodlust. He did not shift his stance. And yet, he was the most terrifying presence she had ever encountered. From a distance, Vali and her team watched. Albion's voice rumbled in the back of Vali's mind. This man does not feel like a devil, an angel, or a human. No. He feels wrong. Kuroka's usual smirk was absent. She wrapped her arms around herself, her golden eyes wide. Naya. This doesn't feel like fighting a strong enemy. This feels like we're staring at something that shouldn't exist. Biku gripped his staff tightly. TCH. I don't like this. He's just standing there, but my instincts are telling me to run. Even Arthur, ever the calm swordsman, furrowed his brow. I can't feel his presence. No bloodlust, no aura. It's like he's not even here. LeFay shivered. This is like a nightmare. Kateria couldn't take it anymore. Her body moved before she even thought about it. With a scream, she shot forward, instinct driving her to kill this thing before it could move. Lightning crackled around her, and hundreds of magic circles appeared in an instant, firing a barrage of destruction spells. The battlefield exploded in flames. The sky flashed with violet lightning, the earth shattering beneath the force of her magic. And yet, as the dust settled, her breath caught in her throat. Kokushibo stood there, unharmed. His blade was still at his side. Her heart pounded violently against her ribs. She refused to hesitate. With a furious snarl, she launched herself at him, moving faster than sound. Her hands became a blur, magic-infused claws tearing toward his throat. Then, he finally moved. Kokushibo took one slow step forward. Kateria's entire body seized up. Her breathing turned ragged. She felt something she had never felt before. True fear. Her legs trembled, the overwhelming weight of his presence crushing her soul. Her mind screamed at her to run. But she knew. She wouldn't make it. Kokushibo raised his blade. The battlefield held its breath. Then, slash. A crescent arc of pure death erased the space between them. Kateria didn't even have time to scream. Her body was bisected. Blood filled the air. Her two halves collapsed to the ground. Silence. Vali and her team could not move. LeFay covered her mouth, her entire body shaking. Biku's fingers twitched over his staff, sweat dripping down his face. Kuroka physically stepped back. This isn't a warrior, Naya. Arthur's grip on Excalibur tightened. His sharp gaze never left Kokushibo. That was beyond swordsmanship. Vali clenched her fists. For the first time in her life, she questioned if she could win. Aftermath. The battlefield was eerily silent. Everyone stood frozen, scanning their surroundings. The tension was suffocating, the weight of Kokushibo's presence still lingering in the air. But he was gone. Riaz, Serafal, and the others instinctively braced themselves, expecting another attack. Their eyes darted across the ruins, searching for any sign of him. Where did he go? Penemu muttered, her voice barely above a whisper. Serafal narrowed her eyes. I don't sense anything. It's like he disappeared completely. That's impossible. Kiba said, gripping his sword. Someone like that doesn't just vanish. But he did. No trace. No sound. Not even a flicker of movement. It was as if he had never been there to begin with. Yet, he was somewhere. And only one group knew where. The aftermath of Kokushibo's massacre left an eerie silence over the battlefield. The air hung thick with blood, smoke, and the lingering pressure of something far beyond mortal comprehension. Kateria Leviathan was gone. Erased before she could even register her own death. And yet, Kokushibo did not revel in his victory. He did not gloat. He merely stood in place, his blood-stained blade resting at his side, his 6 glowing eyes surveying the field with unsettling calmness. Then, everyone blinked. And in that single instant, he vanished. The next thing they knew, he was above them. Perched on the crumbling rooftop where Vali and her team stood. Vali's eyes widened. Her instincts flared, her magic surging at the sheer impossibility of what had just happened. One moment, he was there. The next, he was upon them. No sound. No movement. Just there. Kuroka audibly gasped, her cat-like instinct screaming at her to flee. And Naya. What the hell? Biku took a reflexive step back, gripping his staff. I didn't even see him move. LeFay's breath hitched. That's not teleportation. It's something else. Arthur Pendragon, however, did not flinch. His grip on Excalibur ruler tightened, his sharp blue eyes locking onto Kokushibo with measured calculation. Kokushibo, unfazed by their reactions, simply let his many eyes settle upon Volley. His presence alone sent a wave of suffocating dread through the group. Then, he spoke. "If you wish to test your blade." He lifted his katana slightly, the blade gleaming under the moonlight. Then stepped forward. His voice was calm, steady, but absolute. Volley inhaled sharply. Every fiber of her being screamed danger. She had faced dragons, gods, beings who could bend reality itself. And yet, this was something else. Something that didn't belong in this world. She exhaled slowly, her lips curling into a forced smirk. "I think I'll pass." Kokushibo said nothing. He simply stared. Then, a new voice broke the silence. "I won't." Arthur Pendragon stepped forward. Volley's head snapped toward him. "Arthur." Volley started, but he raised a hand, silencing her. His gaze never left Kokushibo. He raised his hand, silencing her. His blue eyes burned with something few had ever seen in him before. He looked determined. "This man," Arthur's voice was steady, unwavering, "is the strongest swordsman I have ever seen." He lifted Excalibur ruler, the legendary blade humming with raw power. "And that means I cannot ignore him." Kokushibo tilted his head slightly. His many eyes flickered with something unreadable. Then, "Very well." The gust of wind swept through the ruins, carrying the weight of an inevitable clash. Arthur exhaled. His stance shifted. And then, he struck first. The battle began. The moon hung high, casting its pale glow over a desolate battlefield. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying the scent of steel and blood. Arthur stood firm, his sword gleaming under the moonlight. Across from him, a figure loomed tall, unnerving, and impossibly compassed. Kokushibo, the legendary swordsman who had transcended humanity itself. Arthur's heart pounded. He had sought out Kokushibo for one reason. To prove that he was the strongest swordsman. He believed that if he could defeat this immortal warrior, he would stand at the pinnacle of all swordsmanship. From a nearby ridge, Volley and her team watched in stunned silence. The sheer presence of Kokushibo was suffocating even from a distance, but Arthur stood before him without hesitation. "Arthur. What the hell are you doing?" One of her teammates muttered, his fists clenched. "He's trying to take on that monster alone." Another added, disbelief in his voice. Volley's sharp eyes never left the battlefield. Unlike the others, she knew Arthur's ambition. She knew what this fight meant to him. But even knowing that, the gap between them was terrifying. When Kokushibo moved for the first time, a chill ran down her spine. "He's too fast," she whispered. The first clash of blades rang out like thunder. Sparks flew, and in that instant, it was clear Arthur's swordsmanship was refined, but Kokushibo's was beyond human limits. His movements were unreadable, his blade an extension of inevitability itself. Volley's team could only watch as Arthur pushed forward relentlessly, only to be met with overwhelming skill. The longer the fight went on, the clearer it became. "This isn't a fight," one of her teammates muttered, voice unsteady. "It's a lesson." Volley gritted her teeth. "Arthur won't stop. Even if he knows he's outmatched." Back to Issei and Arthur. Kokushibo gazed at him with 6 eyes, his expression unreadable. "You seek strength. Yet your blade wavers," he said, his voice calm but weighty. Arthur gritted his teeth. "I will surpass you," he declared, raising his sword into his stance. Kokushibo said nothing. Instead, he drew his sword with an eerie grace, the edge reflecting the moon's radiance. And then, they clashed. Arthur lunged first, his blade cutting through the night with precision. Kokushibo barely moved, tilting his sword ever so slightly, deflecting the strike effortlessly. Sparks danced in the air as Arthur pressed forward, launching a relentless flurry of attacks. Yet, no matter how fast he struck, Kokushibo was faster. No matter how refined his technique, Kokushibo's was superior. Arthur's confidence began to waver. Then, Kokushibo whispered. "Moon breathing, 5th form. Moon spirit calamitous eddy." A whirl of crescent-shaped slashes spiraled outward. Arthur barely managed to dodge, feeling the shockwave slice through the air. The ground behind him was torn apart in a circular pattern, showcasing the devastating reach of the attack. Arthur steadied his breathing. He couldn't hold back. He adjusted his stance, tightening his grip. His footwork became sharper, his blade moving with newfound speed. He launched another assault, each strike aiming for Kokushibo's vitals. Kokushibo nodded slightly, as if acknowledging Arthur's determination. But then, moon breathing, 8th form. Moon dragon ringtail. A massive crescent slash, twisting like a serpent, came crashing toward Arthur. He barely blocked it, but the force sent him skidding backward. His arms trembled from the sheer impact. The gap. It was enormous. From the ridge, Volley's team instinctively jumped back, as if the technique could reach them. "No way." Volley clenched her fists. "This isn't just power," she muttered. "This is the swordsmanship of someone who has perfected their craft for centuries." Her teammates could only stare in silent horror. Arthur pushed forward again despite the obvious gap. Doubt crept in. No matter how much skill he poured into his blade, it felt like a child challenging a god. But Arthur gritted his teeth. He couldn't afford to hesitate. He dashed forward again, pushing past his fear. Their swords clashed again and again, ringing through the empty night. Arthur's movements became desperate, fueled by sheer willpower. Kokushibo remained eerily composed, his swordsmanship never faltering. Then, Kokushibo sighed. Moon breathing, 16th form. Moonbow half moon. A crescent slash, swift and absolute, came from an unexpected angle. Arthur had no time to react. His body moved instinctively. He barely managed to shift his stance, avoiding a fatal wound, but the attack sent him crashing to the ground. His vision blurred. His body screamed in pain. His sword was still in his grip, but his strength was fading. From the ridge, Vali and her team stood frozen. They had witnessed countless battles, but never one like this. As he lay there, staring at the endless night sky, something stirred within him. He had wanted to defeat Kokushibo. But now, he simply wanted to be acknowledged. Through his blurred vision, he saw Kokushibo step closer. Instead of finishing him off, Kokushibo simply gazed down at him. "You fought well," Kokushibo said at last. Arthur's breath hitched. Those words coming from this swordsman meant everything. His consciousness wavered, but his lips curled into a faint smile. He wasn't the strongest. Not yet. But he would keep going. As darkness claimed him, Arthur held on to one thought. One day, he would reach that level. One day, he would stand as an equal. Tonight was not his victory. But it was his beginning. Scene changed to Vali and her team base. Arthur's body ached. His limbs refused to move, his chest rose and fell in uneven breaths, and his vision was a blur of dark skies and shifting shadows. He was alive. But barely. Footsteps pounded against the ground, voices breaking through the ringing in his ears. Arthur. That voice. Vali. The weight pressing on his body lightened slightly as hands lifted him up, shifting him gently. His vision cleared just enough to see Vali's face above him, her usually sharp gaze filled with something unfamiliar concern. "You idiot," she muttered, her voice rough. "What were you thinking?" Arthur tried to speak, but his throat was dry. He barely managed a weak chuckle. "That was insane." Another voice chimed in. It was one of his teammates, it was none other than his little sister, LeFay, eyes wide with disbelief. "You actually fought that monster one-on-one. You." She swallowed hard. "You almost died." Arthur let out a slow breath. "I know." The battle flashed in his mind, his sword clashing against Kokushibo's, the overwhelming gap in skill, the way he was overpowered at every turn. But more than that. He had been acknowledged. Kokushibo's words echoed in his mind. "You fought well." He had lost, but those words meant everything. His fingers curled slightly, weak but determined. Vali's grip on his shoulder tightened. "Arthur, we all saw it. That fight. It wasn't just skill, was it?" Arthur exhaled. "No. It wasn't." His team fell silent. They had all seen that the level of Kokushibo's swordsmanship was beyond human comprehension. Even the best warriors they had ever faced paled in comparison to what they had just witnessed. Bhikkhu hesitated before speaking. "So, what does this mean for you, Arthur?" Arthur slowly turned his head, eyes still half-lidded with exhaustion. He could feel the bruises, the deep ache in his muscles, the weight of failure pressing down on him. And yet, deep inside him, something burned brighter than ever. "I'm going to keep going," he said, voice hoarse but certain. "I'm going to become stronger." Vali studied him for a long moment. Then, she sighed, shaking her head. "You really don't change." Kuroka scoffed. "Naya. Well, that's Arthur for you." Despite the tension, there was a faint chuckle from the group. The weight in the air didn't disappear, but the sharp edge of worry softened. Arthur closed his eyes briefly. He had faced a true master, and though he had lost, it wasn't the end. This was just another step forward. Vali's base. Vali stood at the center of her base, arms crossed as she gazed at the map on the table. The fight between Arthur and Kokushibo, or rather, Issei, had left a deep impression on her. That level of swordsmanship, that raw power. It was something she couldn't ignore. She needed to get stronger. Kuroka leaned against the wall, tail flicking lazily. "You're heading out, aren't you?" Vali didn't answer immediately. Albion's voice echoed in her mind. "You intend to seek power by training alone, but you realize what you saw was beyond mere strength, don't you?" Vali clenched her fist. "Yeah." Kuroka studied her for a moment before pushing off the wall. "Then I'm coming with you." Vali raised a brow. "Why?" "Because you're not the only one who needs to get stronger, Naya." Kuroka smirked, but there was a seriousness in her golden eyes. "Besides, I'm curious. If someone like Arthur couldn't stand against him, what kind of training does it take to even get close?" Vali scoffed but didn't refuse. She turned, stepping toward the exit. "Fine. Let's go." As they left the base, their thoughts lingered on the silent warrior they had witnessed. Neither spoke of trying to challenge him because they both knew, after what they had seen, that it wasn't even a question. First, they had to grow. Only then could they even think of standing in his presence as equals. Volley and Kuroka soared through the sky, the wind rushing past them as they flew over the rugged mountain range. The sun had begun its descent, casting a warm golden glow over the peaks. The two remained silent, each lost in their own thoughts, replaying the battle they had witnessed between Arthur and Kokushibo Issei. Hard to believe someone that strong exists. Kuroka murmured, breaking the silence. Volley didn't respond immediately. Her gaze remained focused ahead, scanning the terrain below. Then, something caught her attention. On a large flat rock near the edge of a cliff, a lone figure sat motionless, bathed in the fading sunlight. Kuroka followed her gaze and tensed. Is that him? Kokushibo sat cross-legged, eyes closed, his swords resting beside him. The golden light of the sunset reflected off his crimson-marked skin, making his presence almost otherworldly. There was a stillness around him, an aura of absolute focus. Even from a distance, his presence felt suffocating. Nearby ledge. Kuroka hesitated before landing beside her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Volley took a step forward. Why are you here? Silence. The breeze swept through the mountains, rustling their cloaks. Just as Volley was about to lose patience, Kokushibo's lips parted. Training. A single word. Low, calm, carrying an undeniable weight. Volley narrowed her eyes. Training, huh? Kuroka tilted her head. Meditation is training. Kokushibo finally opened his 6 eyes, their eerie glow piercing through the dimming light. His gaze landed on them, unreadable yet filled with something ancient. To wield a blade is to wield the mind. Volley's breath hitched. For someone who barely spoke, his words carried an undeniable truth. Kuroka crossed her arms. That's deeper than I expected. But still, Arthur trained his mind and his blade, and he still lost. What's the difference? Kokushibo turned his head slightly toward her. Effort without direction is wasted motion. Kuroka blinked. TCH. Now you sound like an old sage. Volley stepped closer. Then tell me what's the right direction. Kokushibo regarded her for a moment before speaking again. To grow stronger is not merely to swing a sword. Volley clenched her fists. Then what is it? Kokushibo exhaled slowly, his gaze shifting toward the setting sun. To understand. Kuroka raised a brow. Understand what? He closed his eyes again. Yourself. The blade. The path you walk. Silence followed. Kuroka and Volley exchanged glances. His words weren't just vague philosophy, there was something deeper behind them, something earned through experience. After a long pause, Volley spoke again. And what do you understand? For the first time, Kokushibo took longer to answer. His eyes slowly opened, and for a brief moment, something unreadable flickered in them. That the path has no end. Volley's breath caught. She wasn't sure why, but those words struck her. Kuroka let out a slow whistle. Heavy words, Naya. Volley remained quiet, her gaze fixed on him. She wasn't ready to leave yet, not when she still had questions. Crossing her arms, she leaned against a nearby rock, simply watching him. Volley remained quiet, her gaze fixed on him. She wasn't ready to leave yet, not when she still had questions. Crossing her arms, she leaned against a nearby rock, simply watching him. Kuroka, on the other hand, crouched down near Kokushibo with a smirk. You're really the quiet type, huh? Must be hard keeping a conversation going. Kokushibo gave no response. Kuroka sighed dramatically. Come on, you can at least talk a little, Naya. How'd you get that strong? What's your secret? Still, nothing. His breathing remained steady, his presence like an immovable mountain. Kuroka pouted. TCH. You're no fun. She glanced at Volley. Are we really just gonna stand here and watch him? Volley didn't answer. Her mind was still processing everything he had said, every movement he made. His stillness, his control, it was unlike anything she had ever seen. Kuroka huffed. Fine, but I'm not just gonna sit here in silence. She flicked her tail and poked at the ground with her claw. You really don't get lonely out here. This time, Kokushibo shifted ever so slightly. No. Kuroka raised a brow. Huh. Must be nice, being content with nothing but your sword. Kokushibo closed his eyes again. The blade is never alone. Kuroka stared at him for a moment before letting out a small laugh. You really are something else, huh? Naya. Volley continued watching, analyzing everything about him. She didn't speak, didn't interrupt, she just observed. The wind howled through the mountains, the sun dipping lower into the horizon. Kokushibo remained unmoving, his presence as vast and overwhelming as the sky itself. Kuroka pouted. TCH. You're no fun. Naya. She glanced at Volley. Are we really just gonna stand here and watch him? Naya. Before Volley could answer, a new voice echoed through the area, deep and ancient. He is beyond mere strength. A powerful surge of energy erupted behind Vali as a large spectral dragon wing manifested from her back. The air trembled as Albion's presence filled the space. His voice, though only meant for Vali's mind, carried weight even in the open. Kokushibo's eyes opened slightly, his 6 glowing eyes shifting toward the sacred gear. His expression remained unreadable, but his gaze lingered. Kuroka's ears twitched, her eyes widening. Albion, huh? Didn't think you'd speak up. Albion's voice rumbled again. This man. He has touched a level of mastery few beings in this world can claim. Vali narrowed her eyes. What are you getting at? Albion didn't answer immediately. Instead, his massive spectral wing twitched slightly, as if scrutinizing Kokushibo further. You. Warrior. Albion's voice directed itself toward Kokushibo. You have honed your blade beyond the realm of mortals. Yet your presence does not waver. No arrogance. No thirst for power. Kokushibo finally spoke, his voice steady as a mountain. Because power is not the goal. Albion was silent for a moment, as if processing the response. Then what is? Kokushibo's gaze drifted toward the setting sun, his expression unreadable. To walk forward. Albion let out a low hum. A simple answer, yet it holds weight. Kuroka blinked, glancing between them. Are we seriously having a philosophy debate now? Vali, however, was focused. Albion rarely acknowledged others like this, let alone showed this much interest in someone. She crossed her arms. You recognize something in him, don't you? Albion's response came after a pause. Yes. He is unlike any I have encountered. There is no hesitation in his will, no doubt in his path. Kuroka smirked. And here I thought you only cared about dragon fights and power levels. Albion didn't respond to her, his gaze or what passed for it still lingering on Kokushibo. Vali stepped forward slightly. If you're so sure about him, then tell me. Can I reach that level? Albion's voice rumbled deep. That is for you to discover. But understand this, Vali. The dragon's wing flickered slightly, the energy pulsing around her. Strength alone will never be enough. To walk the path he walks. You must first learn what it means to wield more than just power. Vali clenched her fists. Kokushibo remained silent, his presence as vast and overwhelming as ever. The wind howled through the mountains, the last rays of sunlight painting the sky in hues of crimson and gold. Vali, Kuroka, and Albion stayed there a while longer, the weight of Kokushibo's presence pressing upon them, an undeniable force that none of them could ignore. Few minutes later. The silence stretched, the wind carrying the weight of their words into the fading light. Kokushibo had closed his eyes again, seemingly finished speaking, but then. Why do you not train now? His voice cut through the quiet, steady and direct. Vali raised a brow. What? Kokushibo's 6 eyes opened slightly, his gaze shifting toward her. If you seek strength, why wait? Kuroka tilted her head. Well, it's not like she can just. You have the power. Kokushibo interrupted, his tone unwavering. And the time. Yet you hesitate. Vali crossed her arms, a flicker of irritation in her expression. I don't hesitate. I know when to train and when to observe. Kokushibo remained still, then spoke again. Your dragon is strong. Albion let out a low hum. HMPH. Of course I am. Kokushibo nodded slightly. Strong enough to master all of Drake's powers. A sharp silence followed. Vali narrowed her eyes. What? Albion's wing pulsed. What do you mean? Kokushibo's expression didn't change. The Red Dragon Emperor, Drake, was powerful. But he had limits. He tilted his head slightly, his 6 eyes unreadable. And yet, there are those who say his power could have reached beyond what even he had grasped. Kuroka frowned. Wait, are you saying someone actually mastered all of Drake's abilities? Kokushibo nodded. Yes. Albion's energy flickered, his voice calm but questioning. Who? Kokushibo closed his eyes again. A man long forgotten. He reached what Drake could not. Vali clenched her fists. TCH. If that were true, we'd know about it. There's no record of anyone like that. Kuroka crossed her arms. Sounds like a legend. Kokushibo finally turned to look at them, his 6 glowing eyes steady. The reason you all don't know this person is because he is the current Red Dragon Emperor. The air grew still. Kokushibo continued, his voice unwavering. He is still training. And I. He closed his eyes momentarily before opening them again. I taught him everything I know. A heavy silence followed. Albion's presence pulsed, but for the first time, the ancient dragon did not immediately respond. Vali's eyes narrowed. You're lying. Kokushibo said nothing. Kuroka let out a nervous chuckle. Hold on. You're saying the current Red Dragon Emperor, the one walking around right now, has already surpassed Drake. Kokushibo remained silent for a long moment before speaking again. Not yet. Vali scoffed. TCH. Then it doesn't matter. But her tone lacked its usual sharpness. There was something unsettling about his certainty. Albion finally spoke. If such a person exists, why do I not know of him? Kokushibo's 6 eyes flickered. Perhaps. Because it is not yet time for you to know. Another silence followed. Then, Kokushibo spoke once more, his voice quieter this time. After training him myself, he started to resemble me a bit. Vali and Kuroka froze. Albion's presence flickered with something unreadable. Vali narrowed her eyes. What does that mean? Kokushibo didn't answer. Kuroka, sensing the eerie weight of his words, let out a slow exhale. You're saying, he's like you? Kokushibo's gaze returned to the horizon. In some ways. The mountain wind carried his words away, leaving behind an unsettling tension in the air. Then, he added. You will meet him soon. If you see someone wearing the same clothes as mine, that is him. The wind howled softly as his word sank in. Vali's eyes narrowed slightly. TCH. We'll see about that. But even as she said it, the thought lingered in her mind. If what he said was true. Then what kind of opponent was she about to face? Few minutes later. Vali narrowed her eyes at the silent figure before her. The weight of Kokushibo's presence was suffocating, and his refusal to answer her questions only stoked her frustration. She had hoped to gain some insight into his strength to understand what kind of monster stood before her, but he remained as still as a statue, his unreadable gaze locked on her. TCH. Fine. If you won't talk, then I'm not wasting my time here. Vali spun on her heel, her white coat billowing behind her. Let's go, Kuroka. Kuroka hesitated for a moment, her golden eyes flickering between Kokushibo and Vali. She had been intrigued by him, by the depth of his silence, but she could sense Vali's growing irritation. With a sigh, she stretched her arms behind her head. Alright. No need to get all moody, Naya. As the two turned to leave, Albion's voice echoed in Vali's mind, his tone thoughtful. Vali. If that man is truly as strong as I suspect, then I wonder. Who currently holds Drake's power? Vali's footsteps faltered for a fraction of a second before she continued walking. Albion's question carried weight, a reminder of the eternal rivalry between the White Dragon Emperor and the Red Dragon Emperor. If a being like Kokushibo existed, then who was out there carrying Drake's soul? She clenched her fists. I don't know, Albion. She muttered under her breath. But I intend to find out. Behind them, Kokushibo remained unmoving, his 6 eyes watching as they disappeared into the distance. The wind whispered through the trees, and then, slowly, his form began to shift. His 6 eyes faded, his demonic features dissolving as he assumed the appearance of a human once more. His long dark hair remained, but his menacing aura softened, blending seamlessly with the night. His garments transformed as well, clad in dark robes, with heterochromatic eyes gleaming with an otherworldly intensity. Issei's transformation was complete. His hair, long and flowing, added to his enigmatic aura. His face, now fully human, bore a striking resemblance to an ancient warrior of legend, one that seemed eerily familiar. As Vali and Kuroka flew through the darkened sky, heading back home, Kuroka suddenly tensed. Vali. Someone's there, Naya. Vali turned her gaze downward, spotting a lone figure standing atop a distant hill, illuminated faintly by the moonlight. The sight made her breath hitch. His attire, the regal crimson cloak, and his compassed but commanding presence, sent a jolt through her. Is that the Red Dragon Emperor? Kuroka whispered, her tail twitching warily. Vali's eyes narrowed as she took in his features. The structured face, the intense gaze. It was as if the man before them was the very being Albion had just spoken of. But what truly unnerved her was the aura radiating from him. It was ancient, overwhelming, yet unmistakably familiar. Albion's voice came again, this time more urgent. Vali. I can sense it. Drake's power. It's coming from him. Vali's heart pounded as she scrutinized the distant figure. If Albion was right, then the impossible had just happened. I don't know what's going on, she admitted, her voice tense. But we're going to find out soon. Without hesitation, Vali angled her wings and descended rapidly, Kuroka following close behind. As they neared the ground, the figure remained still, his crimson cloak flowing in the wind. His face was calm, but his presence was undeniable. Vali landed a few meters away, her stance guarded. You there? She called out, her voice sharp. Who are you? The man slowly lifted his gaze, his golden eyes meeting hers. His expression was unreadable, but the aura he exuded sent shivers down her spine. For a moment, the only sound was the rustling of the trees. Albion spoke once more, his tone laced with uncertainty. This power. It feels like Drake's, but something is different. Vali tightened her fists, stepping forward cautiously. Are you the Red Dragon Emperor? She demanded. The man remained silent, studying her with an unwavering gaze. Then, in a deep, measured tone, he finally spoke. Perhaps. Vali's eyes narrowed at the man's cryptic response. His presence was overwhelming, a force that pressed against her instincts like an undeniable weight. Albion stirred within her mind, still unsettled by the energy radiating from him. This is wrong. Albion murmured. He carries the essence of Drake, but there's something else, something ancient. Volley refused to let the unease show on her face. She took another step forward, her wings spreading slightly in preparation. If you're the Red Dragon Emperor, then you shouldn't mind a little test. Kuroka, standing beside her, flicked her tail. Nah, Volley, are you sure about this? She asked, her voice laced with caution. That guy isn't reacting like a normal person. He's too calm. The man tilted his head slightly at their words, his expression still unreadable. Then, with a slow motion, he lifted his hand and rested it on the hilt of the katana at his waist. The gesture was neither aggressive nor defensive, but it carried a weight that sent a sharp thrill down Volley's spine. She clenched her fists. No more games. In an instant, she activated her balance breaker. Silver armor wrapped around her form, glowing with the power of the White Dragon Emperor. A moment later, Kuroka raised her hands, dark energy coiling around her fingers. The man finally moved. With a single step, he vanished. No sound, no wasted movement, just pure speed. Volley barely had time to react before he appeared directly in front of her, his golden eyes mere inches from hers. A flash of steel accompanied his movement, the edge of his blade gleaming in the moonlight. Instinct screamed at her to move. She twisted her body, barely avoiding the strike. The air where she had stood was split apart, a thin line of destruction left in its wake. Albion's warning rang through her mind. That's not Drake's power, it's something else entirely. Kuroka leaped back, forming several magic circles in rapid succession. Nah. What kind of sword technique is that? That's not normal swordplay. Volley's mind raced. Kokushibo had once mentioned training this man. If that were true, then was he using that strange moon-breathing technique? Her heart pounded. This wasn't an ordinary opponent. This was something else, something unknown. And Volley never backed down from the unknown. With a sharp exhale, she charged, prepared to test her strength against the enigmatic warrior before her. The clash was immediate and explosive. Their movements blurred, steel meeting magic-infused fists in a flurry of high-speed strikes. Volley dodged, countered, and struck back, but each time, the man's blade seemed to anticipate her attacks. Kuroka unleashed waves of dark energy, yet he weaved through them effortlessly, his movements precise and methodical. Despite the relentless assault, the man still held back. Volley could feel it. He wasn't using his full strength, he was testing them. That realization only fueled her resolve. She darted forward, her fist crackling with raw demonic power, aiming straight for his chest. Then, for the first time, he countered with something different. A red gauntlet materialized over his arm, its emerald jewel pulsing with ominous light. Volley's eyes widened in recognition. Boosted gear. Albion's voice echoed her shock. Before she could react, the gauntlet's energy surged. A deep voice resonated from it. Boost. Power erupted around the man, the sheer force ending Volley and Kuroka skidding backward. The earth beneath them cracked, the air vibrating with draconic might. Kuroka's ears twitched, her eyes filled with disbelief. Nah. He really has the boosted gear. But how? Volley gritted her teeth, excitement flickering in her gaze. Things just got interesting. With renewed determination, she launched forward once more, prepared to fight a battle unlike any she had ever faced. Issei exhaled slowly, rolling his shoulders. The weight of the boosted gear's power coiled within his arm, restrained but potent. Boost. The gauntlet pulsed again, multiplying his power. He blurred forward, meeting Volley's charge with a devastating punch. Their fists collided, the shockwave splitting the sky. Volley gritted her teeth as she was sent flying backward, barely managing to stabilize herself mid-air. She wiped a trickle of blood from her lip, a wild grin forming. Not bad. Kuroka sent a barrage of magic blasts toward Issei, but he twisted mid-air, deflecting them with the back of his hand. He turned his gaze toward her, his golden eyes glowing ominously. Drake, how is this possible? Albion growled. His power. It's not just from you. Issei said nothing, but his aura darkened slightly. The katana in his other hand pulsed, as if in response to his growing power. He sheathed it slowly, then raised his gauntlet. Boost. Volley barely had time to react before he appeared in front of her again, this time with the sheer force of his speed alone, sending her crashing into the ground. The impact shattered her armor, leaving her vulnerable as she gasped for breath. She groaned, trying to push herself up, but the shadow of Issei's sword loomed over her, poised to strike. Kuroka, seeing an opening, launched a powerful blast of dark magic behind Issei, aiming for his blind spot. Without even turning, Issei deflected it with a flick of his boosted gear, the attack dispersing harmlessly into the sky. However, the momentary distraction was enough. Volley surged forward, kicking Issei's legs out from under him. But instead of letting him fall, she took the opportunity to twist their positions, forcing Issei onto his back with her straddling him below his waist. For the first time, Issei's mouth slightly parted in surprise, his golden eyes blinking in momentary shock. But even then, his face remained as unreadable as ever, his cold demeanor barely cracking. Kuroka, witnessing the scene, covered her mouth with a smirk. Nah. I didn't think you were the type to get this close to someone. Vali, still straddling him, took a moment to truly look at him. Now that she was up close, she noticed a resemblance between him and Kokushibo, the same sharp features, the same overwhelming presence. Yet, there was something else. Something that made her heart race. She quickly shook off the thought and scowled, standing up and stepping back. TCH. Don't get the wrong idea. Issei simply stood up, brushing himself off, his mouth closing back to its usual firm line. Without a word, he extended his hand, offering to help Vali up. For a brief moment, she hesitated before finally taking it. Kuroka wrapped her arms around Issei's arm, pressing her ample chest against him. Nah. Strong and mysterious, just my type. How about it? Maybe you and I could get to know each other better. Maybe even have some little kittens together. Vali scoffed, turning away with a scowl. Cut it out, Kuroka. Oh. Why, are you jealous? Kuroka teased before smirking even wider. Then you wouldn't mind if I make him mine then? Vali's eye twitched, her arms tightening slightly across her chest. Do what you want, she said, voice cool but slightly clipped. Issei merely sighed, ignoring Kuroka's advances. Are we done? Drake chuckled inside the boosted gear. Ha. Albion, your host got thrown around. My partner didn't even go all out. Albion huffed. Enjoy your moment, Drake. This isn't over. Vali crossed her arms, hiding the intrigue flickering in her gaze. For now. Issei said, and over his hand for a handshake. Vali, and she's Kuroka. Vali shake his hand and release her hand from his. Kuroka tilted her head, her golden eyes narrowing in curiosity as she observed Issei. There was something eerily familiar about him, the way he moved, the way he fought. Even the aura he exuded felt reminiscent of someone she had only recently encountered. Nah. She purred, stepping closer, still clinging to his arm. You're really strong, you know. And that swordplay of yours. It reminds me of someone. She paused, tapping her chin. Tell me, were you Kokushibo's student? Or maybe he was the one who taught you? At her words, Vali's gaze sharpened, the air around her subtly shifting. Albion remained silent, but his presence in her mind was palpable, waiting for a response just as much as she was. Issei didn't react immediately. His golden eyes remained unreadable, his expression calm and detached as ever. Kuroka's question hung in the air, tension creeping into the silence. Then, finally, he spoke. Maybe. A single word, vague yet suggestive. It wasn't a denial, nor was it confirmation. It was just enough to leave doubt lingering in the air. Kuroka's tail flicked, her playful smirk never fading. Really? Because you fight a lot like him, Nah. The same speed, the same precision. Even your presence kinda reminds me of him. Vali narrowed her eyes. Then tell me this, where did you learn to fight like that? That wasn't just simple swordsmanship. It was refined, deliberate. You weren't just using skill. You were using a technique. One I've only ever seen Kokushibo use. Issei remained still, his gaze locked onto hers. Then, as if dismissing the conversation entirely, he turned away. It doesn't matter. That answer only irritated Vali more. Her fists clenched at her sides. TCH. Avoiding the question doesn't mean I'll stop asking. Kuroka giggled, tilting her head up at Issei. Nah. You're so secretive. Makes you even more interesting. Issei sighed, slipping his arm free from Kuroka's grasp. He took a step forward, glancing between the two women before speaking once more. If that's all, then I'll be leaving. Vali clicked her tongue but didn't stop him. She wasn't done with him yet, not by a long shot. There were too many questions, too many unknowns surrounding him. And Vali never left things unanswered. Kuroka, on the other hand, was still watching him like a cat eyeing a particularly interesting mouse. I dunno, Vali. I think we should keep an eye on this one. Something tells me he's got more secrets than he's letting on. Vali crossed her arms, her silver wings twitching slightly. I already planned on it. As Issei walked away, the moonlight casting a long shadow behind him, a thought lingered in Vali's mind. Just who are you really? Scene change into a forest on a dark stars. The cold night air whispered through the trees as Issei walked deeper into the forest, his step silent against the earth. The moon above cast its pale glow, illuminating the path ahead. Behind him, Vali and Kuroka followed at a measured distance, careful to remain unnoticed. Kuroka's ears twitched, her tail swing as she spoke in a hushed tone. Nah. He's really not in a hurry, huh? It's like he knows we're following him but just doesn't care. He does know. Vali muttered, her eyes locked onto Issei's form. He's not trying to lose us, either. He's just letting us follow. That's what makes him so interesting. Kuroka grinned. A secretive swordsman with a quiet brooding nature. Nah, I think I like this one. Vali shot her a side glance, but chose not to respond. Instead, she focused on the journey ahead. They had been walking for what felt like hours, moving deeper into the dense forest. The terrain became more rugged, yet Issei never faltered. Eventually, the trees parted to reveal a secluded clearing. There, nestled against a backdrop of towering trees, stood a small wooden hut. Smoke curled lazily from a stone chimney, the faint glow of firelight flickering through the window. The structure was simple, made of logs, yet sturdy. So, this is where he lives. Volley noted, arms crossed. Didn't expect him to have a place like this. Kuroka purred, stepping closer. Rustic but cozy, nigh. I like it. Issei reached the door, placing a hand on the wooden frame before pausing. Without turning around, he spoke, his voice carrying through the crisp night air. You've followed me this far. Come in, or leave. Volley's gaze narrowed, but she stepped forward. Kuroka grinned, following her lead. Inside, the warmth of the fireplace greeted them. The interior was simple yet well maintained. A single large bed sat in the corner, its sheets neatly arranged. A modest kitchen area was tucked against the side, equipped with modern appliances that contrasted the hut's exterior. A bathroom door stood slightly ajar, revealing a surprisingly modern interior. Kuroka whistled, plopping onto the bed with a satisfied sigh. Well, looks like you're living pretty comfortably, nigh. Didn't expect that. Issei ignored her, walking over to the fireplace and stoking the embers. Volley stood by the door, her silver eyes scanning every detail of the room. This doesn't seem like the home of someone who's constantly on the move. You've been here a while. Maybe. Issei responded vaguely, adding a log to the fire. As the warmth spread through the room, a conversation echoed in Volley's mind. Albion, so, this is where he resides. Interesting. Drake's voice, indeed. It's a quiet place, fitting for someone like him. Albion, you really are lucky, Drake. You always seem to end up with powerful hosts. Meanwhile, I've had to wait. Too long, honestly. Drake, HMPH. It's not luck, Albion. It's just fate playing its course. Fate. TCH. If it were up to me, I would have awakened far sooner. Maybe then I wouldn't be so behind. Albion respond. Drake chuckled. Behind. You sound envious. That's unlike you. Albion scoffed. Maybe I am. Maybe I just hate waiting. Seeing power just out of reach, knowing my host could surpass yours if only he had the chance. It's frustrating. Drake's voice held amusement. Patience was never your strong suit. But you're awake now, aren't you? And Volley is no ordinary host. Albion sighed, his irritation fading slightly. Yeah. I suppose you're right. Still, one of these days, my host will surpass yours. Drake let out another deep chuckle. I'll be waiting. The conversation faded as Volley refocused on the present. She crossed her arms, staring at Issei as he sat near the fire, his expression unreadable. Just who are you really? After a few minutes Issei stood from his spot by the fire, walking toward the small kitchen area without a word. He moved with the same quiet grace he always carried, opening a cabinet and retrieving a few ingredients. Volley and Kuroka watched as he set a pot on the stove, his hands working effortlessly as he prepared a meal. The rhythmic chopping of garlic and onions filled the silence, followed by the sizzle of chicken as it hit the hot pan. The rich aroma quickly spread through the room, a mix of soy sauce, vinegar, and spices melding into something mouthwatering. Kuroka's nose twitched, her ears perking up. Nigh. That smells amazing. What are you making? Issei didn't look up, his focus solely on the dish. Adobo. Volley raised an eyebrow. Adobo? A dish I found while traveling in the Philippines. He answered, his voice calm. One of my favorites. Kuroka grinned, her tail swing. Didn't think you had a taste for things like that, nigh. You don't seem like the type to cook. Issei didn't respond immediately. He lifted the lid of the pot, letting the steam rise, before giving the dish a careful stir. His movements were precise, each action executed with the same level of skill and control as his swordsmanship. He wasn't just cooking, he was crafting something with purpose. Volley watched closely, intrigued by how natural he seemed in the kitchen. He's strong, he can cook, and most of all, he's handsome. She shook her head quickly, snapping herself out of it. What am I thinking? Oh. Having some interesting thoughts, are we? Albion teased. Volley scowled inwardly. Shut up. Albion chuckled. No need to be embarrassed, partner. You're only human. Well, mostly. She ignored him and refocused on the meal. Issei glanced at her briefly before turning back to the stove. Cooking and fighting aren't so different. Both require patience, technique, and knowing when to act. Kuroka leaned back against the bed, stretching with a satisfied sigh. Well, as long as it tastes as good as it smells, I won't complain, nigh. Minutes later, he plated the adobo, setting it on the small wooden table, along with a bowl of steaming rice. Without a word, he took a seat and began to eat. Kuroka wasted no time digging in, her ears twitching in delight. Nigh. This is amazing. The meat is so tender, and the flavor Volley took a bite, her expression unreadable at first, but the slight nod she gave was enough to show she approved. Not bad. Issei continued eating in silence, the warmth of the meal blending with the soft crackling of the fireplace. For a moment, the three of them simply sat there, sharing a meal in the quiet of the night. After finishing his meal, Issei set his chopsticks down and spoke in his usual calm tone. "Thank you for the meal." He stood up, walked over to the corner of the room, and grabbed a fishing rod. Without another word, he stepped outside, making his way toward the nearby lake, where a grand waterfall cascaded down into the water below. The moonlight reflected off the lake surface, shimmering as the sound of rushing water filled the night air. He reached the lake's edge, where 8 wooden chairs were neatly arranged, each one carved by his own hands. Taking a seat on one of them, he cast his fishing line into the water, the bait disappearing beneath the rippling surface. Not long after, Volley and Kuroka followed him, their curiosity piqued. Kuroka stretched her arms above her head and purred. "Naya. You really do live a peaceful life, huh? Cooking, fishing. Is there anything you don't do?" Volley crossed her arms, her gaze focused on Issei. "I didn't take you for the fishing type." Issei remained silent for a moment, watching the water. Then, without looking at them, he replied. "It's quiet." Kuroka tilted her head. "You like the quiet that much?" He nodded slightly. "It gives me time to think." Volley sat on one of the empty chairs, resting her chin on her hand. "So, what do you think about while fishing?" Issei was silent for a moment before responding. "Nothing. And everything." Kuroka giggled. "Mysterious as always, Nai." The three of them sat by the lake, the sound of the waterfall filling the space between their words, the night stretching on in quiet companionship. Volley rested her arms behind her head, gazing at the lake as the moonlight reflected off its surface. "Didn't think I'd end up here tonight." Kuroka stretched lazily, her tail flicking. "Nai. It's not bad, though. A calm night, a good view, and interesting company. And of course, a strong, handsome swordsman to keep us entertained." She scooted closer to Issei, leaning slightly toward him. Issei, you ever thought about having someone to share these quiet nights with? A beautiful, affectionate girl to keep you warm, Naya." Her voice took on a teasing purr as she traced a finger along the armrest of his chair. Issei remained unaffected, keeping his focus on the water. "No." Kuroka giggled, unfazed by his short response. "Naya. So cold, yet so interesting. The strong, silent type really does have its charm." Albion. A rather bold approach. Drake. "I have to agree, she's persistent, I'll give her that." Volley clicked her tongue, shifting slightly in her seat. She wasn't sure why, but the sight of Kuroka flirting so openly with Issei irritated her. It wasn't like she cared. "Right." Kuroka leaned in even closer, tilting her head playfully. "You know, if you ever get tired of being alone, I wouldn't mind keeping you company, Naya." Issei finally glanced at her, his golden eyes unreadable. "I'm fine." Kuroka pouted but grinned. "TCH. You're making me work for it, huh? That's fine. I like a challenge." Volley crossed her arms, letting out a scoff. "Not bad." Kuroka turned to her with a sly smirk. "Jealous, Volley." Volley narrowed her eyes but kept her cool. "As if. I just find it amusing how desperate you look." Kuroka giggled. "Oh, don't be shy. If you want to sit closer to him, just say so." Volley looked away. "What am I even thinking?" She shook her head. "You're imagining things." "Albion, are you sure about that?" Volley gritted her teeth. "Shut up." The quiet night stretched on, the waterfall's steady roar blending with the occasional sound of the fishing line being cast into the lake, while Kuroka continued to playfully prod Issei, and Volley struggled to ignore the slight irritation creeping into her chest. The night had deepened, the lake surface shimmering beneath the pale moonlight. The gentle rush of the waterfall provided a soothing backdrop as Issei reeled in his line, a modest catch wriggling at the end of the hook. With practiced ease, he removed the fish and set it in a nearby bucket before casting his line once more. Kuroka stretched, arching her back in a feline manner. "Naya. It's getting late. Should we head back soon, or are you planning to sit here all night, Issei?" Issei remained quiet, eyes locked on the water. "You can leave if you want." Kuroka pouted but smirked playfully. "TCH. Cold as ever." Volley leaned forward slightly, her silver eyes observing him. "You really don't like company, do you?" Issei finally spoke, his voice calm yet firm. "It's not that. I just don't mind being alone." Kuroka rolled her eyes but didn't press further. Instead, she shifted her attention to Volley, her lips curling into a mischievous grin. "Well, since we're here, why don't we make things more interesting? A little bet, perhaps?" Volley narrowed her eyes. "What kind of bet?" Kuroka's tail flicked as she pointed at Issei. "Whoever catches the biggest fish gets to ask him one question he has to answer. No dodging." Albion hummed, intriguing. "Do you truly think he'll answer?" Drake chuckled. "That depends. He might surprise them." Volley smirked. "Fine. You're on." Kuroka grinned as she grabbed a fishing rod and cast her line. Get ready to spill your secrets, Issei. Issei simply continued fishing, his expression unreadable. The challenge had been set, but whether or not he would truly play along remained to be seen. The night stretched on, ripples spreading across the water as the game began. The lake remained still, save for the occasional ripple as a fish broke the surface. The moon cast its glow upon the water, reflecting the silent contest taking place between Volley and Kuroka. Kuroka hummed, her tail flicking lazily as she reeled in her line. TCH, still nothing. This lake's being stubborn tonight, Naya. Volley smirked, glancing at her own unmoving rod. Or maybe you're just not as good as you think. Albion scoffed, fishing is a test of patience. I suppose that is not your strength, Kuroka. Drake chuckled. Yet patience is required in battle too. Perhaps this is a lesson in disguise. Issei sat silently, his fishing line still, his gaze locked on the water. He had barely spoken since the bet began, but his presence alone seemed to weigh on the atmosphere. He exuded an air of calm that contrasted with the playful energy between the two women. Kuroka leaned toward Issei, resting her arms on the wooden armrest of his chair. Nah, Issei. If I win, you'll answer my question honestly, right? No holding back. Issei didn't look at her. That was the deal. Kuroka grinned. Good. Then I'll have to make sure I win. Volley rolled her eyes. You're acting like you already caught something. Kuroka winked. Confidence is key, Volley-chan. You should try it sometime. Volley huffed, crossing her arms as she focused on her line. She refused to lose, especially not to Kuroka. The wind carried the sound of rustling leaves as the three continued their quiet competition, the night stretching on, filled with unspoken thoughts and hidden intentions. Suddenly, Volley's line jerked violently, the rod bending under the weight of her catch. She tightened her grip and reeled in with precision, her eyes gleaming with determination. The water splashed as she pulled in a sizable fish, much larger than anything caught so far. Kuroka groaned, slumping her shoulders. TCH, looks like I lost this one. Volley smirked triumphantly, lifting the fish slightly. Looks like he has to answer my question now. Issei remained impassive. Go ahead. Volley tilted her head slightly, as if considering her words carefully. Then, a glint of amusement flashed in her silver eyes. If you had to describe the most important thing in your life using only one word, what would it be? Issei's fingers paused on his fishing rod for a brief moment. His gaze lingered on the water, unreadable. Kuroka raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Ooh, I like that one, Naya. Makes me wonder what's really on his mind. A long silence followed before Issei finally responded, his voice calm and steady. Sometimes, some answers are meant to be hidden. Volley's eyes narrowed slightly. Avoiding the question, huh? Kuroka smirked, stretching her arms above her head. Since you didn't answer honestly, Volley gets to ask another question. But this time, you have to answer honestly. Volley tapped her fingers against her arm, eyes scanning Issei's face. The competition was over, but the air between them still carried unspoken curiosity and intrigue. The night stretched on, the sound of the waterfall blending with the distant calls of the forest. After a moment, Volley spoke again, her tone more thoughtful. Alright then. What's something you regret not doing? Issei remained silent for a moment, his gaze drifting from the water to the distant trees. The firelight from the house flickered in the distance, casting long shadows. Finally, he exhaled softly. Changing the past is impossible, so regrets are pointless. Volley frowned slightly. That's not an answer. Kuroka grinned. Naya, avoiding again. Maybe we should make him answer with a penalty next time. Issei closed his eyes briefly, before opening them again. Not being able to keep a promise. Volley's expression shifted, a flicker of something unreadable passing through her eyes. A promise, huh? Must have been important. Kuroka leaned in closer, curiosity brimming. You gonna tell us what kind of promise, or is that another hidden answer? Issei's grip on his fishing rod tightened slightly. It doesn't matter anymore. The atmosphere grew heavier, a contrast to the peaceful setting around them. The conversation seemed to touch on something deeper within Issei, but he remained closed off, unwilling to reveal more. Albion murmured. Hiding pain behind vague words. How typical. Drake sighed. Some wounds never truly heal. Volley watched Issei for a moment longer before looking away, her expression unreadable. Fine. Keep your secrets for now. Kuroka stretched, breaking the tension with a teasing smile. Well, that was a mood shift, Naya. How about we lighten things up? Maybe another bet. This time, loser has to cook breakfast tomorrow. Volley smirked. You're on. Issei said nothing, merely casting his line back into the water, as if the conversation had never happened. The night continued, the sound of the waterfall and rustling trees the only witnesses to their unspoken thoughts. The next morning. The scent of sizzling meat filled the air. Volley stirred awake, her senses immediately alert. She sat up, noticing that Kuroka was still sprawled across the bed, her tail lazily flicking as she slept. Curious, Vali got up and walked outside. The crisp morning air greeted her, along with the sight of Issei standing near a wooden table, grilling pork over an open flame. A neat arrangement of wooden chairs, 8 in total, circled the table, all handcrafted with care. Kuroka soon emerged, rubbing her eyes. Something smells good, Naya. She perked up as she spotted Issei. Oh ho. So our quiet swordsman is also a morning chef. That's a nice surprise. Vali crossed her arms. I didn't expect you to wake up early just to cook. Issei flipped a piece of pork on the grill before answering. I never slept. Kuroka blinked in surprise. Wait, what? You stayed up all night? Vali narrowed her eyes. Why? Issei didn't answer immediately, tending to the fire. Finally, he spoke. I'm used to it. Kuroka tilted her head. Used to it? What, you just don't sleep? That's kinda weird, Naya. Vali frowned. That's not normal. Even the strongest fighters need rest. Issei remained quiet, his gaze fixed on the grill. Some habits don't fade. Kuroka sniffed the air, her mouth watering. What are we having? Grilled pork. Vali raised a brow, taking a seat at the table. You had all this prepared. Made the table and chairs myself. The food was stored ahead of time. Kuroka whistled. Naya. So you're good with your hands, huh? Bet you're handy for all sorts of things. Vali shot her a look. Can you not flirt for once? Kuroka grinned. Why? Does it bother you? Drake chuckled, she's getting under your skin again. Albion rumbled in amusement. Vali never handles this sort of thing well. Vali sighed, ignoring them both. So, where'd you learn to cook? Issei glanced at her briefly before turning the meat. Traveled a lot. Picked it up along the way. Kuroka propped her chin on her hands, watching him. And here I thought you were just the strong, silent type. Turns out you're full of surprises. Vali leaned back, arms crossed. Still, you don't seem like someone who cooks for company. Issei remained quiet for a moment before speaking. Sometimes habits stay with you, even if you don't need them anymore. That response left an air of intrigue, but neither of them pressed further. The sizzling of the grill filled the silence as they watched him work, the scent of seasoned pork making their stomachs growl. Kuroka purred. Well, as long as the food is good, I won't complain. Vali smirked. Yeah. Let's see if it actually tastes as good as it smells. Issei said nothing, calmly tending to the grill as the morning sun bathed the clearing in golden light. The morning sun cast long shadows across the clearing as Vali and Kuroka finished their meal. The grilled pork had been delicious, though neither wanted to admit it outright. Issei, as usual, remained quiet, finishing his portion without much reaction. Kuroka stretched, letting out a satisfied sigh. That was good, Nai. Maybe I should stick around more often if I get meals like this. Vali rolled her eyes but silently agreed. Still, something was nagging at her. She glanced at Issei, who was already starting to clean up. We've been out here for a while. We should probably head back to base before anyone gets suspicious. Kuroka groaned. Ugh, do we have to? It's so peaceful here. Yes, we have to. Vali stood up, stretching her arms. We've been gone long enough. Kuroka sighed dramatically before turning to Issei with a playful smirk. Guess that means we'll have to leave our mysterious swordsman behind. Gonna miss me, Issei. Issei didn't even look at her as he replied. Not particularly. Kuroka pouted. So cold, Nai. You could at least pretend. Vali shook her head. He's not the type to pretend anything. Issei placed the clean grilling tools to the side before finally addressing them. I won't stop you from leaving. Vali nodded, already expecting that kind of response. Alright then. We'll be off. Kuroka sighed again but followed Vali as they made their way toward the edge of the clearing. Just before stepping into the trees, she turned back one last time. You know, Issei. You're an interesting one. Don't go disappearing on us, okay? Issei didn't respond, simply sitting back in his chair as if he had never been interrupted. Kuroka raised a hand, forming a teleportation circle beneath her and Vali. Just as the magic began to glow, she suddenly stepped closer to Issei, leaning in and pressing a quick kiss against his cheek. Issei's eyes widened slightly, the only hint of surprise he showed. Kuroka giggled, stepping back into the teleportation circle. A little something to remember me by, Nai. Vali crossed her arms, her expression unreadable as the light of the teleportation engulfed them. Moments later, they were gone, leaving Issei alone once more. He sat in silence, staring at the remnants of the morning fire, his thoughts unknown to anyone but himself. Scene changed to their base. The air shifted as Vali and Kuroka reappeared at their base, the teleportation magic fading around them. The moment their feet touched solid ground, Vali turned to Kuroka, arms crossed, silver eyes narrowed. What was that? Kuroka blinked innocently. What was what, Nai? Vali frowned. The kiss. Why did you do that? Kuroka smirked, stretching her arms behind her head. Oh. Is little Volley-chan jealous? She leaned closer, teasing. You looked kinda stiff when it happened. Maybe you wanted to be the one to do it. Volley scoffed, her arms tightening across her chest. That's ridiculous. I just didn't expect you to pull something like that. Kuroka purred, flicking her tail lazily. I just wanted to see if I could get a reaction out of him. And I did, even if it was just for a second. That makes it fun. Albion, oh. Seems like Kuroka is getting ahead. How unfortunate, Volley. Volley's eye twitched. Shut it. Albion, come on now, be honest. You were bothered, weren't you? Volley let out a frustrated sigh, choosing to ignore him. She refocused on Kuroka. So? Why did you really do it? Kuroka grinned, a playful gleam in her eyes. Because I took a liking to him. And I won't give him up. Volley tensed slightly at those words, but forced herself to remain composed. You're playing a dangerous game. Kuroka hummed in amusement. That's what makes it exciting, Nai. Besides. I think you're more curious about him than you let on. Volley didn't respond immediately, instead looking toward the distant horizon. Let's just focus on the mission. We've been gone long enough. Kuroka smirked but let it go, following Volley as they walked deeper into the base. But a mischievous glint remained in her eyes. And in the back of her mind, Volley found herself thinking about a certain quiet swordsman, far more than she would have liked. Volley walked into the meeting chamber where the core members of the hero faction had gathered. The room was dimly lit, with a large table at its center, surrounded by high-backed chairs. Each seat was occupied by someone dangerous in their own right. At the head of the table sat Cao Cao, the leader of the hero faction. He was a tall man with sharp calculating eyes and short silver hair. Clad in his usual attire, he exuded confidence as he leaned forward, his spear, the true Longinus, resting against the table. You're finally back, Volley. We were beginning to wonder if you had forgotten your responsibilities. To his right sat Arthur Pendragon, his blonde hair neatly kept, his demeanor ever composed. His Excalibur ruler rested beside him, his fingers lightly drumming against the table as he watched the conversation unfold. Beside him was his sister, Lefay Pendragon, a young magician clad in a gothic dress. She had a cheerful yet curious glint in her eyes as she observed Volley. Biku, the Monkey King's descendant, lounged in his chair with a lazy grin, his staff leaning against his shoulder. Took you long enough, Volley. Don't tell me you actually found something or someone interesting out there. Opposite him sat Krom Kruich, an infamous evil dragon who had taken on a humanoid female form. She had long dark hair, but a striking feature was the white bangs that fell in the middle of her forehead. Her golden eyes gleamed with amusement as she smirked. Indeed, you've been away for quite some time. I wonder, did you find something more compelling than this little war we're waging? Tiamat, the strongest of the 5 dragon kings, was also present, her piercing blue eyes filled with suspicion as she leaned back in her chair. Unlike Krom Kruich, she exuded an aura of quiet intensity, as if measuring Volley's every move. Volley ignored the teasing remarks, her arms crossing. Enough talk. What's the status? Cao Cao smirked, tapping the table. Straight to business, as always. We've received reports that several factions are beginning to move. It seems they're responding to our latest actions. Arthur adjusted his gloves. The church is tightening its defenses. They suspect we'll make another move soon. Lefay nodded. Their exorcists are on high alert. But more interestingly, some stray elements in the supernatural world are beginning to shift, as if drawn to something or someone. Volley narrowed her eyes. Something. Or someone. Biku chuckled. Funny you'd ask that. There's been talk of a swordsman. Someone unusual. Sound familiar? Krom Kruich leaned forward, her golden eyes narrowing with curiosity. I'd like to meet him myself if he's as interesting as these rumors claim. Tiamat scoffed lightly but said nothing, merely watching Volley's reaction. Volley kept her face neutral, but inside, she was already considering the possibility. Had Issei's presence stirred something in the supernatural world? If so, their next moves would need to be made carefully. Cao Cao smirked. Seems like things are getting interesting, wouldn't you say, Volley? Volley kept her expression unreadable as she met Cao Cao's smirk with a cool gaze. Perhaps. But we won't know for sure until we see for ourselves. Biku grinned, leaning forward. Then why don't we focus on Kyoto instead? We've already seen the swordsman, and we know what he's capable of. Arthur nodded, his fingers lightly drumming on Excalibur ruler. There's no doubt Kokushibo is stronger than me. That battle made that painfully clear. Lefay tilted her head. But he let you live. That must mean something. Kuroka smirked. Or he just didn't care enough to finish the fight, Naya. Volley sighed. Enough. We already analyzed that battle. There's no point in discussing it further. What matters now is Kyoto. Cao Cao leaned back, his smirk never fading. Yes, Kyoto. Yusaka is the key to opening the Dragon Gate. If we capture her, we'll finally have a way to bring Office's plan into motion. Biku chuckled. And once the gate is open, Great Red won't have anywhere to run. Crom Cruich, who had been silently observing, finally spoke. You're underestimating Great Red. Even with the Dragon Gate, we'll still need a strategy. Tiamat narrowed her eyes. Agreed. Capturing Yasaka will be one thing. Dealing with Great Red is another. Arthur exhaled. Then we move carefully. We need to strike Kyoto fast and take Yasaka before her forces can react. LeFay hesitated. I don't like it, but I understand why we're doing this. Volley remained silent for a moment before finally nodding. We move soon. Be ready. The room fell into silence as each member contemplated the plan ahead. The battle with Kokushibo had shaken them, but now, their sights were set on something even greater, bringing down the Dragon of Dreams himself. Kyoto burned under the night sky. Buildings lay in ruin as supernatural forces clashed against the hero faction's onslaught. The once peaceful city was now a battlefield, the streets littered with debris and bodies of those who dared to resist. Flames danced along the rooftops, casting eerie shadows as Volley and her group pressed forward. Arthur led the charge, his blade cutting through the enemy with precision. His movements were controlled, ruthless, as he carved a path toward the shrine. Biku cackled as he weaved through the battlefield, his staff striking down opponents with playful ease. LeFay followed closely behind, her magic forming barriers and countering attacks from Kyoto's defenders. Kuroka moved like a shadow, claws dripping with energy as she struck down her enemies, her tail swaying in excitement. Crom Cruich walked through the chaos unfazed, effortlessly swatting away attackers with inhuman strength. Volley soared above, her wings of light illuminating the destruction below. No unnecessary slaughter. She commanded coldly, though she doubted anyone was truly listening. As they reached the shrine, the final line of defense stood before them. Yasaka's personal guards. Kitsune warriors, their eyes glowing with determination, formed a protective circle around their leader. Yasaka herself stood in the center, her golden fur shining under the moonlight. Her expression was calm but fierce, power radiating from her form. You dare to bring such destruction to my city? She asked, voice filled with restrained fury. Cao Cao stepped forward, true longinus in hand. It's nothing personal, Yasaka. You're simply the key we need. Yasaka's eyes narrowed. I will not allow myself to be taken so easily. Volley exhaled. This wouldn't be an easy fight. Then we'll just have to force you. She muttered, preparing for battle. Cao Cao wasted no time. In an instant, he lunged forward, true longinus gleaming with divine radiance. Yasaka raised her hands, golden flames roaring to life as she unleashed a blast of foxfire toward him. The moment her attack met the true longinus, however, it was effortlessly dispersed. Cao Cao smirked. You're strong, Yasaka. But against the true longinus, your power means little. Yasaka's expression darkened. She moved swiftly, weaving through the battlefield, her tails glowing with immense energy. She slashed at him with raw spiritual force, but Cao Cao countered every strike with precise movements, his spear deflecting her blows effortlessly. She leapt backward, summoning a massive sphere of condensed foxfire and hurling it at him. Cao Cao merely twirled his spear, piercing straight through the attack, causing it to explode behind him harmlessly. Arthur, watching from the sidelines, narrowed his eyes. Even for Yasaka, fighting Cao Cao directly is impossible. Kuroka crossed her arms, her tail flicking. That damn spear is cheating, Naya. Volley remained silent, merely observing. Yasaka's strength was undeniable, but against the power of the true longinus, there was no real contest. Cao Cao moved in for the final blow. With a single thrust, he struck Yasaka in the abdomen, a shockwave erupting from the impact. She gasped, staggering back, her body trembling from the divine force coursing through her. Biku whistled. Well, that was fast. Yasaka dropped to one knee, breathing heavily, but she refused to submit. She glared at Cao Cao, defiance burning in her golden eyes. Cao Cao rested the tip of his spear against her throat. Surrender, Yasaka. You've lost. Despite the pain, she spat. I will never help you. Cao Cao chuckled. Oh, you will. One way or another. Far from the chaos, high above the burning city, a lone figure stood atop a ruined pagoda. His 6 eyes gleamed under the blood-red moon, taking in the devastation with a quiet, unreadable gaze. The eerie glow of his crimson markings pulsed softly as the wind carried the distant echoes of battle to his ears. Kokushibo had been watching. His demonic form, clad in a dark kimono patterned with shifting moons, made him an ominous presence against the backdrop of destruction. He remained silent, his long flowing hair moving slightly with the wind. The sight before him did not stir any emotions, it was simply a moment, another page in the history of conflict. His fingers lightly traced the hilt of his blade. The presence of strong warriors had drawn his attention. He had already seen Arthur's resolve firsthand. Now, he was observing Volley, Kuroka, and the others as they fought their way toward Yasaka. Would this battle bring any meaning? Would it be worth watching to the end? For now, he simply waited. Yosaka dropped to one knee, breathing heavily, but she refused to submit. She glared at Cao Cao, defiance burning in her golden eyes. Cao Cao rested the tip of his spear against her throat. "Surrender, Yosaka. You've lost." Despite the pain, she spat. "I will never help you." Cao Cao chuckled. "Oh, you will. One way or another. Don't hurt my mama." A young voice rang out across the battlefield, filled with fear and determination. The group turned to see a small girl with golden hair and fox ears standing before Yosaka, her arms outstretched protectively. Tears welled in her bright eyes, but she refused to back down. "Kunu." Yosaka's expression shifted, eyes widening in shock. "Kunu. Get back." Cao Cao raised an amused brow. "Oh? And who might you be?" Kunu glared at him, her small hands clenched into fists. "You can't take my mama away." Cao Cao sighed, twirling the true longinus in his grip. "How touching." His smirk faded slightly. "But she's coming with us." Kunu's body trembled, but she stood her ground. Vali narrowed her eyes, her arms crossing. Even Kuroka frowned, her ears twitching at the sight of the child. Yosaka, despite her wounds, forced herself to stand. "Leave her out of this." Cao Cao merely smirked. "Sorry, but we can't afford distractions." Before anyone could react, a heavy silence fell upon the battlefield. A suffocating pressure filled the air, making even the most battle-hardened warriors tense up. Then, without warning, Kokushibo appeared beside Cao Cao, as if stepping out of thin air. No one had sensed him. No one had seen him move. A shiver ran down everyone's spine. Fear gripped them, their bodies trembling involuntarily, as 6 glowing eyes bore into them with quiet intensity. Cao Cao, for the first time in a long while, felt cold sweat drip down his neck. Kokushibo's voice, deep and unwavering, broke the silence. "Cao Cao. You have gone too far." The fires of Kyoto still raged as the hero faction stood around the wounded Yosaka, her golden fur dimmed from exhaustion. Kunu had stepped forward in a desperate attempt to shield her mother, her small frame trembling, yet her resolve unbroken. Cao Cao, with a true longinus in hand, regarded the scene with an amused smirk, but his patience was thinning. Then, without a sound, without a shift in the air, he was there. Kokushibo. None of them had seen him move. None of them had even sensed his presence approaching. One moment, Cao Cao was standing alone, prepared to end the confrontation, and the next, a towering figure stood beside him, his 6 glowing eyes radiating an eerie intensity. A chill spread through the battlefield. Even the strongest among them, Vali, Arthur, Crom Cruach and Tiamat, felt an unnatural dread crawl down their spines. It was a fear so primal, so overwhelming, that their bodies instinctively recoiled. Cao Cao, for the first time, felt his grip on true longinus tighten involuntarily. His smirk faltered. Kokushibo's deep reverberating voice broke the silence. "Cao Cao. You have gone too far." The weight of his words pressed upon them like an immovable force. The once confident stance of the hero faction wavered as they faced an unknown, yet undeniably superior presence. Bali's mind raced, trying to piece together what little she knew of this swordsman. His power, his speed was unlike anything they had ever encountered. Kunu clutched her mother's robes tightly, peering up at the demon with a mixture of fear and awe. Yosaka, despite her injuries, recognized an opportunity. If this being opposed the hero faction, then perhaps there was still hope. Cao Cao slowly regained his composure, forcing a chuckle. "So, you finally decide to appear. Are you here to stop us? Or are you simply enjoying the spectacle?" Kokushibo turned his many eyes toward him, unreadable and unwavering. "Your ambitions blind you. You trample upon the city, harming the innocent, all for your selfish goals." Arthur stepped forward, his grip on Excalibur ruler tightening. "And what of you? You appeared only now. If you truly opposed us, why wait?" Kokushibo did not answer immediately. His gaze shifted slightly, locking onto Arthur. The blonde swordsman stiffened under the weight of that stare, recalling their previous battle. He had fought Kokushibo once and lost. That loss still burned within him, a reminder of the difference between them. "You are not ready," Kokushibo finally said, before looking back at Cao Cao. "None of you are." Tiamat's piercing blue eyes narrowed, her instincts screaming at her. Unlike the others, she was a being who had lived through countless battles, had faced legends, and even she felt the undeniable pressure radiating from him. She clenched her fists, choosing to remain silent but alert. Biku exhaled, trying to shake off his unease with a forced grin. "TCH, the way you talk, it's like you think you're some god." Kokushibo's hand rested on the hilt of his sword. "I am merely a swordsman." The words, spoken so simply, held an undeniable weight. Cao Cao's mind worked furiously, analyzing the situation. They still outnumbered him. He had the true longinus. But something deep in his instinct screamed at him that numbers meant nothing. Cao Cao smiled again, but it was thinner, less sure. "Then, swordsman, let's see if you live up to the legend." With that, the hero faction attacked. Arthur was the first to move, dashing forward with Excalibur ruler, its power warping the space around it. Cao thrust the true Longinus, a brilliant spear of light streaking toward Kokushibo. At the same time, Crom Cruach, still in her humanoid form, unleashed a torrent of draconic energy, while Biku vaulted from above, staff spinning with deadly momentum. Kokushibo moved. His blade never left its sheath, yet the battlefield shifted around him. Excalibur ruler, aimed for his chest, was parried with a movement so subtle that Arthur barely registered what had happened before he felt his momentum falter. The spear of light from True Longinus was deflected to the side, scattering debris upon impact, yet Kokushibo's hands were still empty. Crom Cruach's draconic breath was met with a motionless counter, her attack splitting apart before reaching Yasaka and Kunu, as if an invisible force had willed it away. Biku's staff crashed down, yet it was stopped in midair, as though an unseen wall had intervened. The counter-attack was instantaneous. Arthur staggered back, his side suddenly bleeding, though none of them had seen the strike. Cao barely dodged what felt like a brush of wind, but the sheer force sent him skidding backward. Crom Cruach recoiled, golden eyes widening, as she realized her attack had not only been neutralized, but dismantled with such precision that the residual energy dissipated harmlessly. Tiamat took a step forward, her dragon instinct screaming at her that this fight was already lost. Yet, she hesitated. "He's toying with us," she muttered under her breath, fists clenching. Biku somersaulted backward, landing beside Arthur, who was clutching his wound. "Yeah. This guy is something else." Cao narrowed his eyes, gripping the true Longinus tighter. "Is that all you've got?" Kokushibo did not respond. His 6 eyes swept over them with cold finality. "Leave," he said, his voice unwavering. "Or perish." The battlefield fell silent, the weight of his ultimatum sinking in. For the first time in his life, Cao hesitated. But only for a moment. "We need Yasaka," he murmured under his breath, loud enough for his allies to hear. "We cannot retreat." Bali clenched her fists, knowing there was no other choice. "Then we fight. Smarter this time." Arthur adjusted his stance, Excalibur ruler radiating power once more. Crom Cruach's golden eyes burned with renewed determination. Tiamat sighed, stepping forward, her presence alone warping the air with overwhelming pressure. Cao twirled the true Longinus, his smirk returning. "You may be strong, Kokushibo. But let's see how you fare against us at our best." Then, they attacked again. This time, with strategy. Tiamat took a step forward, her dragon instinct screaming at her that this fight was already lost. Yet, she hesitated. Then, she acted. In unison with Crom Cruach, she launched forward. Tiamat's claws radiated with the might of a dragon king, while Crom unleashed another wave of destructive energy. Kokushibo's 6 eyes flickered. Moon breathing. Third form. Loathsome moon, chains. The night itself seemed to shift as curved crescent slashes materialized in the air, spiraling in an intricate mesmerizing pattern. The strikes intertwined and surged forward, a dance of death cutting through the battlefield. Crom Cruach barely managed to twist her body away, but even then, her arm was grazed, deep cuts forming as dark blood splattered. Tiamat, despite her power, found herself forced to retreat, her sharpened senses telling her that pressing forward meant death. The battlefield fell silent, the weight of his skill undeniable. A heavy silence hung in the air as the aftermath of Kokushibo's attack settled over the battlefield. The hero faction stood motionless, their earlier confidence wavering against the sheer precision of his moon breathing. The scars of his technique marred the ground, jagged crescent-shaped gouges left in their wake. Tiamat clenched her jaw, flexing her clawed hands as she glared at the towering swordsman. She had fought gods, dragons, and beings of immense power, but something about Kokushibo unsettled her in a way few ever had. His presence was absolute. His blade, no, his entire being was beyond the reach of logic. Crom Cruach gritted her teeth, wiping the blood from her arm. She had taken her fair share of wounds in battle, but for the first time in a long while, a deep instinct told her that this was not an opponent who could be overwhelmed by brute strength alone. Her golden eyes flickered to the battlefield, analyzing the crescent-shaped slashes that had torn through their ranks. "These marks. They're not ordinary cuts. Look at the way the energy lingers," she murmured. Tiamat frowned, kneeling beside one of the slashes. She extended a hand, letting her draconic senses analyze the remnants of the attack. "It's strange," she admitted. "It isn't just a simple sword strike. There's an unnatural consistency to the way the slashes form. Almost as if they are growing." Crom Cruach narrowed her eyes. "A cursed technique?" Tiamat shook her head. "No. Something more. These crescents, they feel like an extension of his will, rather than just his blade." Cao, still gripping the true Longinus tightly, exhaled slowly. "I see now," he muttered, voice laced with tension. "You're no mere swordsman. Your very existence warps the flow of battle." Kokushibo remained unmoving, his many eyes surveying them with unreadable intent. His hands were still empty, his sword unseen, yet he had just torn through their ranks with nothing but technique. "Leave," he repeated, his voice calm but resolute. "You will not take Yusaka." Cao Cao smirked, despite the sweat forming on his brow. "That's not an option." He turned to his allies. "We adapt. We fight together, with precision. If we hesitate, we die." Arthur adjusted his grip on Excalibur ruler, the weapon humming with power. Prom Cruich narrowed her eyes, her draconic aura flaring once more. Tiamat inhaled sharply, pushing aside her hesitation. Bhikkhu spun his staff, his playful demeanor replaced with grim determination. Cao Cao raised a true longinus, its divine radiance pulsing. "Attack." They surged forward as one. Kokushibo's 6 eyes gleamed. Moon breathing. Fifth form. His fifth form moon spirit calamitous eddy manifested in an instant, spiraling arcs of slashes cascading outward like a relentless storm. Tiamat barely managed to weave around the onslaught, but even with her centuries of combat experience, she felt the unnatural pull of the crescents dragging against her aura. Prom Cruich roared, pushing forward with a burst of draconic energy. She swung a clawed hand, aiming to break through Kokushibo's attack by sheer force. The moment her strike connected with the swirling crescents, her eyes widened. The slashes did not simply dissipate, they clung to her energy, warping around her limbs and cutting deeper than physical wounds should allow. Arthur thrust Excalibur ruler forward, attempting to impose his authority over the battlefield. The legendary blade's influence trembled against Kokushibo's presence, but the samurai did not falter. He twisted his stance, bringing his sword upward in a seamless motion. A single crescent arc carved through Arthur's defenses, forcing him to retreat with a sharp exhale. Cao Cao, however, had no intention of backing down. The true longinus blazed as he leapt, aiming a precise thrust toward Kokushibo's heart. The spear tip struck but met nothing but air. A flicker of movement revealed the swordsman's form mere inches away, his blade already descending in response. Bhikkhu intervened, his staff intercepting the strike at the last possible moment. The force of the impact sent him skidding backward, his arms trembling from the sheer weight behind the attack. Tiamat, regaining her footing, unleashed a torrent of draconic flames. The battlefield ignited, swallowing the combatants in a sea of blue fire. Yet from within the inferno, Kokushibo's form emerged, unharmed. His many eyes regarded them with something beyond mere battle instinct, something ancient, something inexorable. "Futility," he murmured. Then, with a single step forward, he vanished. A deafening sound cracked through the battlefield as he reappeared before Tiamat, his blade descending in a fatal arc. Time seemed to slow as she braced herself, knowing she couldn't fully evade the strike. But just before the blade could reach her, a sudden force clashed against Kokushibo's attack. A crimson gauntlet met his sword, halting the strike in an instant. The battlefield stilled as all eyes turned to the new arrival. Standing between Tiamat and Kokushibo was a man who looked eerily similar to Kokushibo himself but in a human form. His long dark hair cascaded down his back, his piercing golden eyes cold and unwavering. The resemblance was uncanny, yet something about him felt distinct. His draconic aura pulsed, radiating a power both familiar and foreign. Kokushibo's many eyes narrowed slightly. "You." Earlier, before the battle began, Kokushibo stood within a secluded forest clearing, bathed in moonlight. His many eyes flickered as he extended his hand, dark energy swirling around him. The air grew thick with power, and slowly, an ethereal form took shape beside him. A perfect replica of himself emerged, identical in every way, save for the lack of demonic traits. This clone, his human counterpart, opened his eyes, revealing golden eyes that glowed with quiet intensity. Kokushibo regarded his creation with a cold, calculating gaze. "You will act as my shadow, my extension. But in this battle, you must take a different path." The clone nodded, his voice calm yet firm. "Understood." For a moment, silence stretched between them before Kokushibo turned away, his gaze drifting toward the distant battlefield. "Do not disappoint me." With that, the clone Issei vanished into the night, moving toward his destined encounter. Tiamat staggered back, her golden eyes widening in shock as she registered what had just happened. But then, anger flashed across her face as she clenched her fists. "You. Why do I sense drag in you?" Her voice carried an edge of accusation. Prom Cruich, standing a few paces away, narrowed her eyes as she also sensed the lingering presence of the Red Dragon Emperor. "This energy. There's no mistaking it. You carry his will." Issei remained impassive, his sacred gear glowing faintly. "It does not concern you." Vali and Kuroka, however, showed no shock. They had already met him before, spent time with him, learned of his existence. Kuroka crossed her arms with a knowing smirk, while Vali kept her gaze steady, as if confirming what she already knew. "So you're finally revealing yourself in battle." Vali muttered. "I wondered when you'd show up." Kokushibo's gaze remained unreadable. He took a step back, shifting his stance. "You interfere." Issei exhaled, rolling his shoulders. "Yeah, well. Can't exactly let you run wild, can I?" Without another word, he lunged forward, his sacred gear flaring with raw power. Kokushibo met him head-on, their blades clashing in a burst of force that shook the battlefield. But then, to everyone's shock, Issei's movements mirrored Kokushibo's exactly. Issei Moon breathing first form. Dark Moon Evening Palace. As he swung his blade, crescent-shaped slashes erupted from his strikes identical to the moon-breathing techniques Kokushibo wielded. The battlefield was suddenly filled with two warriors of moonlight, their slashes weaving and colliding in a deadly spectacle of precision. Tiamat gritted her teeth, frustration evident in her eyes. How can he use the same techniques? Kuroka, watching from the sidelines, chuckled. He's full of surprises, isn't he? Kokushibo's eyes gleamed as he pressed forward. Interesting. Are you against your master? Issei parried another slash, his voice steady. Master. I cannot allow you to do this. Despite his skill, Issei was still outmatched. Kokushibo's blade danced through his defenses, carving wounds into his flesh like strokes of a painter's brush. Deep cuts bled freely, but Issei did not falter. Not enough. Kokushibo muttered, watching his younger self struggle to stand. Issei clenched his fists, his sacred gear flaring. He refused to fall just yet. The battle had taken a new shape, one between past and present, between what was and what could have been. The battlefield trembled under the weight of their clashing blades, each strike sending shockwaves that split the ground beneath them. Crescent slashes erupted in all directions, colliding and dispersing into ribbons of moonlight. Issei gritted his teeth, his body already showing signs of strain. Kokushibo, however, remained as composed as ever, his many eyes observing every movement with an eerie calm. You are not ready. Kokushibo murmured, sidestepping another one of Issei's slashes before countering with a precise, lightning-fast cut. Issei barely managed to twist out of the way, but the edge of the blade still grazed his shoulder, drawing a deep gash. He winced, feeling the warmth of his own blood seeping into his clothes, but he refused to stop. Instead, he pushed forward, his sacred gear flaring with renewed energy. Kokushibo raised a brow as Issei's aura pulsed, shifting slightly. It was as if Drake's lingering presence within him was beginning to resonate, fueling his movements. The clone lunged again, his sword carving through the air with practiced precision. Yet, even as his attacks grew fiercer, Kokushibo responded effortlessly, weaving through the slashes and countering with devastating precision. Bali and Kuroka, standing at a distance, watched with growing concern. TCH. This isn't good. Vali muttered, her hands clenching at her sides. He's already sustaining too many injuries. Kuroka's smirk had long vanished, replaced by a sharp frown. We should step in, Naya. He's not going to last much longer. No. Vali's eyes remained locked on the battle, her gaze sharp. He wouldn't want us interfering, not yet. Another clash sent Issei skidding backward, his breaths now coming in short gasps. More cuts adorned his body, each one a painful testament to the widening gap between them. Yet, even as exhaustion weighed on him, his stance remained firm. Kokushibo tilted his head, almost intrigued. Why do you persist? Issei exhaled sharply, wiping a trickle of blood from his mouth. Because. I have something you don't. For the first time, Kokushibo's many eyes narrowed slightly. And what is that? A smirk, faint yet defiant, crossed Issei's lips. People who care. At those words, Kokushibo's blade wavered for just a fraction of a second, a fleeting moment, but enough for Issei to notice. He pressed forward with everything he had left, his blade igniting with crimson energy as he launched a final desperate strike. Kokushibo's expression remained unreadable as he raised his sword in response. The next instant, the battlefield was consumed by a storm of slashes, a crescendo of moonlit destruction, as both warriors clashed in one final exchange. Then, silence. Issei fell to one knee, his sword trembling in his grip. Blood dripped from his wounds, staining the ground beneath him. Kokushibo stood before him, unscathed, his many eyes gazing down with an unreadable expression. Kuroka went in front of Issei, her claws flexing as she prepared to intervene. That's enough, Naya. He can't keep going like this. Vali remained still, but her gaze flickered with something dangerously close to anger. Damn it. She muttered under her breath. Kokushibo exhaled slowly, lowering his blade. You fought well. He said, his voice carrying a rare tone of acknowledgement. But it is not enough. Issei forced himself to look up, his vision blurring. Maybe not. But at least I stood my ground. Kokushibo's many eyes regarded him for a long moment before he turned away, his stance shifting. You have potential. Do not waste it. My disciple. With those final words, he vanished into the night, leaving Issei kneeling amidst the ruins of their battle. Vali and Kuroka rushed forward, their concern evident as they reached his side. Damn it, you reckless idiot. Vali muttered, crouching beside him. What were you thinking, taking him on alone? Issei weakly spoke, his body slumping slightly. I can't. Let him be unchecked. Kuroka huffed, gently pressing against one of his wounds. Next time, don't be so damn stubborn, Naya. As the moonlight bathed the battlefield, the dust began to settle. The fight was over, but the echoes of its impact remained. Vali and Kuroka wasted no time in getting Issei back to their base. His wounds were severe, and despite his durability, he needed immediate attention. The moment they arrived, Kuroka began treating his injuries, using her senjutsu to stabilize him, while Vali ensured no one disturbed them. After hours of careful healing, Issei was moved to a room to rest. His breathing had steadied, but his body was still weak from the battle. Vali and Kuroka lingered for a moment, watching him in silence. "He'll be fine now, right?" Kuroka asked, her voice quieter than usual. Vali crossed her arms, her expression unreadable. "He should be. He just needs rest." With nothing more to do, they left the room, closing the door behind them. The moment the door shut, the air within the room shifted. A faint ripple in the shadows signaled Kokushibo's arrival. His many eyes glowed softly in the dim light as he approached the bed where his clone rested. Without a word, he reached out, and the clone's form began to fade, dissolving into energy before vanishing completely. Now alone, Kokushibo's demonic form flickered, his features shifting until he was fully human once more. Issei Haidu. He exhaled, his golden eyes dim with exhaustion as he laid down in the exact position his clone had occupied. Everything was proceeding as planned. No one would suspect the truth. As he closed his eyes, the weight of battle settled over him, and for the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to rest. The meeting room of the hero faction, now known as the Chaos Brigade, was thick with tension. The recent battle had left its mark, not just physically, but mentally. The gathered members sat around a long table, their expressions dark as they reflected on what had transpired. Cao Cao leaned forward, his fingers interlocked as he exhaled sharply. "That swordsman. Kokushibo. He's on an entirely different level." Arthur's grip on Excalibur ruler tightened. It was like fighting something beyond human comprehension. Every move he made was precise, absolute. "I couldn't even land a proper hit." Crom Cruich crossed her arms, her golden eyes narrowing. His swordplay was one thing, but his presence. It was suffocating. His attacks weren't just powerful, they felt like they were bending reality itself. A tense silence followed before Tiamat suddenly stood up, her aura flaring with anger. Her golden eyes burned with barely restrained fury. "And yet, the one who saved me was him. The host of Dreg." The room grew even heavier. They all knew why Tiamat hated Dreg. Her history with the Red Dragon Emperor was well known, his reckless nature, the way he treated her in the past, and the grievances that had never truly faded. To be saved by his host, of all people, was a bitter pill for her to swallow. "Tiamat." Cao Cao started, his tone measured. "We all understand your hatred, but right now, he's the least of our concerns. The real issue is Kokushibo. If he had truly wanted to, he could have annihilated us all. That wasn't a battle, it was a demonstration. He was showing us that we are nothing to him." Biku, leaning against the wall, clicked his tongue. "TCH. And we couldn't do a damn thing about it." Tiamat clenched her fists, taking a deep breath to calm herself. "I don't care about Kokushibo right now. What I care about is that damn dragon's host interfering in my fight. I don't need his help. I never will." Crom Cruich sighed. "Regardless of how you feel about him, he fought against Kokushibo. That means he's either incredibly foolish, or he has a plan." Kuroka, who had been quiet until now, smirked slightly. "Maybe both, Naya. But I'll tell you this, he's not one to be underestimated." She stretched, then glanced toward the door. "I know. Let's see if Issei is awake. Maybe he has some information about Kokushibo." Vali, standing off to the side, merely crossed her arms. "Whatever he's planning, we'll find out soon enough." The discussion continued, but the anger in the room lingered. Each member had their own thoughts on what had transpired, but one thing was clear. Kokushibo's power was undeniable, and the fact that Issei had stepped in only complicated things further. For now, they needed answers, and more than anything, they needed a way to tip the scales in their favor. The silence that followed Kuroka's suggestion of sharing Dreg was thick enough to cut with a knife. The atmosphere in the room shifted once again as the dragons seemed to wrestle with a bizarre proposition. Albion and Tiamat hovered in midair, exchanging glances that were more assessing than antagonistic. Dreg, meanwhile, was still in a state of disbelief, his crimson scales flickering like a beacon of panic. Even Arthur had set his tea down, no longer interested in the calm relaxation he had earlier been indulging in. Kuroka, on the other hand, was the picture of amusement. She leaned back against the wall with her arms crossed, a smirk plastered across her face as she watched the fallout unfold. "You know, I didn't think you two would get so worked up. I thought you'd be more mature about it." Albion snorted, her wings folding slightly as she glared at the playful Nakamata. "Mature? This is insane." Tiamat tilted her head, her expression unusually calm. "Maybe. But what if it's the only way to avoid more destruction? We've fought for so long, Albion. Isn't it exhausting?" Albion's eyes narrowed at the Dragon King, her wings twitching restlessly. She hated to admit it, but Tiamat had a point. She had fought against Drake, and yet. The rivalry between them never felt like just a rivalry. It was something more complicated. Something deeper than either of them had ever been willing to acknowledge. It's not about exhaustion. Albion grumbled, crossing her arms. It's about pride. And you don't just give that up. Tiamat shrugged nonchalantly, uncaring of Albion's frustration. Pride doesn't win wars, love does. A sharp intake of breath came from Drake, and he stumbled backward, shaking his head. Wait. No. This isn't happening. You can't just share me like a piece of meat. Kuroka laughed lightly. You make it sound so crude, Drake. I'm just offering a more cooperative solution. Come on, don't be so uptight. Drake's eyes flickered with exasperation. This is absurd. I didn't ask for any of this. Arthur, leaning back in his chair and casually observing the scene, couldn't help but chuckle at Drake's obvious discomfort. You've gotten yourself into quite the mess, old dragon. Drake shot him a glare. Thanks for the support, Arthur. Really helpful. But before the bickering could resume, Kuroka raised her hands, her voice carrying an authoritative tone that cut through the noise. Alright. Let's all just calm down for a moment. We're getting nowhere, and frankly, I don't think anyone here wants to deal with a full-blown war between you two. She looked between Tiamat and Albion, then at Drake. How about we approach this rationally? No fighting, no more absurd claims. Just consider it. Albion took a deep breath, her wings folding against her back. I'm listening, she said, though her voice was laced with suspicion. Tiamat, ever the pragmatic one, nodded. Fine. I listen too. But if this doesn't work out, don't say I didn't warn you. Kuroka grinned, clearly pleased with how things were progressing. Perfect. Now, Drake, listen closely. All we're proposing is that you stop being so stubborn. I mean, you've been through what? Thousands of years together. Why not make the most of it? Drake could barely contain his incredulity. That's your idea of making the most of it? A three-way? He nearly shouted. No. Kuroka shot back, not flinching. It's not about that. It's about mutual respect. Just think about it. You two. She pointed to Tiamat and Albion. Want Drake because of his strength, his heart and his whatever else you two get all wrapped up in. Why not put your heads together for once? Albion huffed, her eyes still narrowed. What's the catch? The catch is you need to make it work, or else nothing changes. No more fighting, no more childish bickering. Kuroka said, her tone firm. You both stop playing games and act like the grown-ups you're supposed to be. Tiamat's expression softened ever so slightly. You really think this will work? Kuroka nodded. I do. But that's up to you both. Drake can't be yours unless you make it happen. This isn't about taking sides, it's about finding a way to coexist. The room remained still for a moment as everyone considered the weight of her words. Even Drake, though still clearly uncomfortable, found himself contemplating the idea. His pride was immense, but so was his exhaustion. Maybe. Just maybe, there was something to Kuroka's suggestion. Fine. Albion finally muttered, her voice barely above a growl. But I'm not sharing everything. Tiamat smiled in agreement. Of course. But I'll take what I can get. Kuroka clapped her hands together, pleased with the results. Good. Now, let's move on from this awkward mess, huh? Arthur chuckled, shaking his head in disbelief. This is nuts. Issei, still sitting quietly in the corner, allowed himself the smallest of smirks, though his expression remained unreadable. Dragons and their pride. He murmured softly under his breath. It's an endless cycle. Issei. Kuroka called out, her voice playful. Are you going to sit over there all day, or are you going to join the conversation? Issei's gaze flicked to Kuroka before he stood up, his movements fluid and deliberate. Not my problem. He started to walk toward the exit, pausing only to glance at the still flustered Drake. Let them figure it out. Drake, now somewhat defeated, sat back in his chair with a heavy sigh. I need a drink. Arthur raised his teacup, grinning widely. Now that's something I can get behind. As the group dispersed, each with their own thoughts, the tension that had hung in the air for so long finally seemed to dissipate. The dragons, once at each other's throats, now found themselves caught in an unexpected arrangement. Whether it would hold was anyone's guess. But for the moment, the drama had reached a bizarre truce. The tension in the room had finally settled, though there was still an underlying awkwardness. The dragons, once engaged in heated combat, now lingered in a strange silence, unsure of how to proceed after Kuroka's bizarre proposal. Drake, his pride bruised but still intact, leaned back in his chair, staring blankly at the ceiling. He was still trying to process everything, his mind racing in circles as he struggled to wrap his head around the idea of sharing his bond with Albion and Tiamat. Arthur, ever the observer, leaned back in his chair with a grin plastered on his face. Well, that was something. He remarked, his voice laced with amusement. I have to say, I didn't see that coming. Drake sighed deeply. You and me both, Arthur. Issei, having quietly left the corner, moved toward the door, his presence as calm and silent as ever. He paused briefly before exiting, his voice low and measured. Enough drama for one day. His words hung in the air, and though they weren't directed at anyone in particular, they seemed to carry weight. Hiroka smirked, watching Issei leave without a word. You know, that guy never says much, but when he does, it always feels like he's seen the end of it before it even begins. Does he even care? Drake muttered, his tone somewhere between frustration and resignation. Hiroka chuckled. I think he cares more than he lets on, but yeah, he's definitely a mystery. Vali, who had been standing off to the side, leaned against the wall, her arms folded. Her expression was one of deep thought, though a subtle irritation lingered in her eyes. So this is how we're doing things now. Just accept everything and move on. Albion, her wings twitching in discomfort, avoided Vali's gaze. It's not as simple as you think. She muttered, her voice low. I didn't want things to turn out like this, but here we are. Tiamat, ever pragmatic, nodded in agreement. We've all spent centuries fighting and bickering. Maybe it's time to try something different. Her gaze flicked briefly toward Drake. This isn't about weakness. It's about moving forward. Vali's eyes flicked between the two dragons, clearly unconvinced. Moving forward? Or are you just too tired to keep fighting? Hiroka raised an eyebrow, sensing the underlying tension. Easy there, Vali. I think we all need a little time to process this mess. It's not like anyone's being forced into anything. She glanced at Drake. At least, I don't think so. The air seemed to thicken again as Albion shifted her weight from foot to foot, visibly uncomfortable. Look, I know this isn't ideal. It wasn't supposed to be like this. But maybe, just maybe, it's time to put aside the rivalry and make something new out of this. Tiamat crossed her arms, her posture still relaxed despite the odd circumstances. Maybe. But don't think I've forgotten our past, Albion. This won't be an easy thing to just accept. Nothing is ever easy. Albion muttered, her eyes narrowing in thought. But yeah, I think I can manage. Vali sighed, her expression shifting slightly. I still don't like it. Then maybe it's time for you to decide what you want, Vali. Hiroka said, her voice softening. You've been so focused on being the strongest that you've never really thought about what it means to connect with someone. Maybe that's something you need to figure out. Vali's eyes widened for a moment, her hand tightening around her arm. And you think that's what's been holding me back? Please. Hiroka's tail flicked lazily behind her as she grinned. Could be. But maybe you're just afraid to admit it. Before Vali could respond, Arthur stood from his seat, stretching his arms with a wide grin. Alright, enough with the drama. The dragons can figure out their mess on their own. He raised an eyebrow at Drake. How about a drink? You look like you could use one. Drake shot him a glare, his mood sour, but not wanting to dwell on it too long. Fine. I could use something stronger than tea. As the group began to break apart, the tension from earlier gradually dissolved. Albion, Tiamat and Hiroka moved toward the other side of the room, leaving Drake and Arthur to find their way to the bar. Vali remained by the wall, still lost in her thoughts. For a brief moment, she caught a glimpse of Issei as he made his way toward the door. He didn't look back, his posture as calm and controlled as ever. Something stirred within her, a strange sense of curiosity and admiration for the quiet man who had stayed mostly out of the chaos. She didn't know why, but she felt like there was more to him than what met the eye. Issei had left the chaos of the base behind him, stepping into the cool evening air. The sky overhead was painted in shades of deep orange and purple, the setting sun casting long shadows over the landscape. The distant sounds of bickering and the occasional roar of dragons were drowned out by the rhythmic rush of water cascading down a cliff nearby. After a brief walk, he arrived at a secluded spot near the Chaos Brigade's base. A massive jagged rock that jutted out near the base of a powerful waterfall. The air was misty here, and the roar of the water crashing against the rocks below was deafening, yet strangely calming. Issei had found this place many years ago, a perfect spot for meditation and reflection. Sitting cross-legged on the flat rock, Issei closed his eyes, allowing the energy around him to settle. The sound of the waterfall drowned out everything else, and he allowed his mind to clear. There, at the edge of the world, surrounded by the power of nature, he focused inward. His breath slowed as he entered a deep meditative state. The cool mist washed over him as he let go of everything. His past, his present, and the ever-present weight of the power he wielded. In this moment of stillness, he began to reflect on his own journey. The path that had led him here was one of constant struggle and sacrifice, but also growth. As his past flashed before him. Training under Drake, unlocking the potential within the moon-breathing forms, the never-ending pursuit of power. He remembered the peace that had always eluded him. Peace. Perhaps I'll never find it, he thought to himself, but I can continue to try. I must keep moving forward. That is all I can do. The moment stretched on, the air heavy with the weight of his thoughts. For a brief instant, he felt a tug at the edges of his consciousness. Someone nearby. He didn't need to open his eyes to know who it was. Kuroka approached from behind, her movements light and cautious. "Issei," she called out softly. "Still pretending like you have everything figured out?" Issei didn't open his eyes, but the faintest hint of a smile played on his lips. "I do not pretend." She stepped closer, her tail flicking with curiosity. "If you say so." She paused, her eyes scanning the waterfall and the rock. "This place. It's peaceful. I didn't expect you to have a soft spot for nature. Nature is constant. It does not change. That is why it is soothing." Issei replied, his voice calm and detached. Kuroka chuckled softly, though there was no malice in it. "I'm not sure if you're just too quiet or too deep for me to fully get. But whatever it is, I can't seem to leave you alone." Issei opened his eyes slowly, staring out over the waterfall. "You are free to leave whenever you wish." Kuroka tilted her head, studying him with a mischievous smile. "Maybe. But I'm not ready to leave just yet. Maybe I'll stick around to see what happens next." Issei's gaze flicked briefly to her, then returned to the cascade of water. "Do as you wish." Kuroka laughed lightly, shaking her head. "You're always so simple." But despite her words, there was a subtle respect in her eyes, a sense that she was starting to understand just a little bit more about the quiet warrior before her. Issei didn't respond. He had already closed his eyes again, focusing once more on the world around him, the peaceful sounds of nature calming his mind. For now, that was enough. A few minutes passed, and Kuroka, sensing no immediate change in the atmosphere, began to grow restless. Her tail flicked lazily behind her as she observed Issei, who remained completely still, as if he were a part of the natural landscape. She raised an eyebrow, curiosity piqued, but quickly overridden by her hunger. "Well," she muttered under her breath. "If you're not going to say anything else, I'll go find something to eat. Maybe we can chat more after my stomach's satisfied." With a soft chuckle, Kuroka turned and walked away, her footsteps light and graceful as she made her way back toward the base. Issei didn't respond, his focus entirely on the serene flow of the waterfall. It sounded like a constant presence within his mind. The weight of his past was still there, but in this moment of solitude, it was almost bearable. Then Crom crunched behind Issei, walking towards him. The moment Kuroka left, the air between Issei and Crom Cruich became heavy with an unspoken tension. The dragon let out a low, rumbling hum, her golden eyes locking onto him as he remained seated, seemingly unbothered by her presence. She watched him carefully, her instinct screaming that there was something more to him. Something hidden beneath his calm, unreadable exterior. "You sit here like a monk, but I wonder," Crom said, cracking her knuckles. "Do you actually have the strength to back up that composure?" Issei exhaled slowly, his eyes still closed as he remained in his meditative state. "Testing me will gain you nothing." Crom smirked. "It'll entertain me." Without further warning, she lunged. Issei's body shifted in an instant, his instincts flaring as her fist came crashing down toward him. He tilted his head slightly, avoiding the direct impact, and raised his forearm to block the force of her strike. The impact sent vibrations through his entire body, but he remained unmoved, his feet planted firmly against the rock beneath him. Crom pressed forward, her movements relentless. She swung again, her clawed hand slicing through the air with dangerous speed. Issei parried, redirecting her strike to the side before twisting his body just in time to block her follow-up kick with his forearm. He maintained a defensive stance, never retaliating with full force. Only doing just enough to hold her off. Crom mused as she continued her assault, her movements growing faster. "You're good, but you're only defending. What's the matter? Afraid to fight back?" Issei didn't answer. He kept his guard up, shifting and pivoting as he parried each of her strikes with precise movements. He knew he had to be careful. He couldn't afford to draw attention to himself, couldn't afford to reveal his true strength. For now, he had to act weaker than he was. Crom's smirk widened. She feinted a punch before twisting mid-air, delivering a powerful spinning kick aimed directly at his ribs. This time, Issei met her attack head-on, raising his arm in defense. The impact forced him back slightly, his heels skidding against the stone surface beneath him. The force behind her blows was monstrous. He knew he couldn't keep up this act forever. For a brief moment, he decided to retaliate. His foot shifted, his stance lowering as he inhaled sharply. Then, with a burst of speed, he moved. Moon breathing, first form. Dark moon, evening palace. His sword flickered, a crescent-shaped arc forming in the air as he swung, forcing Crom to leap backward to avoid the slash. The attack was swift, precise, and controlled. Enough to make her take him seriously, but not enough to expose himself. Crom's eyes gleamed with excitement. Now that's more like it. She charged again, wings flaring behind her as she unleashed a barrage of rapid strikes. Issei's body moved on instinct, weaving between her attacks before countering with another technique. Moon breathing, second form. Pearl flower moongazing. His blade moved in a flowing motion, creating several overlapping slashes that barely missed Chrome's form as she twisted midair to evade them. She landed with a heavy thud, eyes narrowing as she studied him. There was something strange about him. He was skilled. Far more skilled than he initially let on. And yet, there was hesitation in his strikes. A reluctance. As if he was deliberately holding back. But Chrome didn't question it. Instead, she smirked. Not bad. Then, she made her final move. She surged forward, aiming for a decisive blow, but at the last second, her footing slipped. The uneven surface of the rock betrayed her balance, causing her to stumble. Issei, having just steadied himself after his last attack, turned toward her instinctively. Only to be met with the full force of her body crashing into him. They tumbled to the ground in a heap, the sound of impact echoing across the waterfall's edge. The weight of Chrome's form pressed against him, her body slightly over his, her face just inches from his own. Time seemed to freeze. The air remained heavy with tension as Chrome Cruich stared down at Issei, her golden eyes gleaming with an intensity that betrayed her thoughts. She hadn't left. Instead, she stood there, unmoving, her gaze fixed on him as he sat back on the rock, once again attempting to return to his meditation. Kuroka and Volley watched from a short distance, exchanging glances. It was clear that Chrome wasn't finished with him just yet. Chrome exhaled sharply, crossing her arms. You're an interesting one, you know that. Issei remained silent. She took a slow step forward, her wings shifting slightly. Most men I fight either break or get excited. But you? You barely react. You only did just enough to stop me. Nothing more. Issei finally opened his eyes, his golden eyes meeting hers. There was no need for more. Chrome's lips curled into a smirk. Maybe. But it makes me want to push you even further. Before he could respond, she suddenly stepped closer, closing the distance between them. Her sharp dragon-like features softened slightly as she peered down at him, curiosity burning in her gaze. You hide something. She murmured. Something powerful. Issei didn't react, but he knew she was seeing more than she should. Chrome Cruich was a warrior through and through. Her instinct sharpened by countless battles. It was only natural she'd sense the depth of his strength, no matter how much he concealed it. The silence stretched between them, thick and unyielding. Then, without thinking, Chrome moved closer. Too close. Her face hovered just inches from his, her breath warm against his skin. She wasn't sure why she did it. Perhaps it was the curiosity, or the way he remained so utterly unreadable despite everything. Maybe it was the raw, unexplainable pull she felt toward him. Something primal and unfamiliar even to her. Kuroka's ears twitched as she realized what was happening. Her eyes widened. Oh, you've got to be kidding me. Volley's expression turned into one of sheer disbelief. Chrome. What the hell are you doing? Chrome flinched, her eyes snapping toward them. Only then did she realize just how close she had gotten. A deep red flush spread across her face as she immediately backed away, turning her head sharply to the side. TCH. It was nothing. She muttered, scowling. Kuroka crossed her arms, smirking. Didn't look like nothing to me, Naya. Volley pinched the bridge of her nose. First Albion and Tiamat, and now you? Seriously? Issei, still seated, merely exhaled through his nose. I should have left when I had the chance. Kuroka sighed dramatically. Too late for that, handsome. Chrome clenched her fists. I'm going to. She paused, realizing that leaving now would only make it worse. Instead, she huffed and sat down on a nearby rock, refusing to meet anyone's gaze. Forget it. I'm staying. Kuroka giggled. Oh. So you're joining our little group now? Chrome scoffed. Hardly. Volley sighed, shaking her head. You're all ridiculous. Issei finally closed his eyes again, hoping. Though he knew it was futile. That he might finally regain some semblance of peace. But with Chrome lingering, Kuroka teasing, and Volley's ever-watchful gaze, he suspected that peace was now a distant memory. The journey back to his secluded home was a quiet one. Issei moved with silent purpose, the weight of the day settling over him like an unseen cloak. His battle with Chrome, the unexpected tension that followed it was all something he preferred to leave behind. He had sought solitude for a reason, and now he was returning to it. Before heading straight to his cabin, Issei made his way to where the dragons had gathered. Drake and Albion had been lingering outside, the remnants of their previous interactions still in the air. He knew what he had to do. Volley walked beside him, arms crossed. You're putting them back already? She asked, glancing at Albion. Albion smirked. And here I thought you enjoyed my company, partner. Drake huffed. We're a part of them, Albion. Doesn't matter if we're outside or inside. We go where they go. Albion chuckled, then turned to Tiamat, who stood nearby, her expression neutral, but her tail twitching slightly. Still, I must say. You must be jealous, Tiamat. After all, I'll be spending all of Drake's time with him, while you'll be left out here alone. Tiamat's eye twitched. Excuse me? Albion smirked. Oh, did I stutter? I meant that once I'm back in the sacred gear with Drake, I'll be the only one close to him. Poor you. Drake sighed. Albion, don't. A sudden surge of magic crackled through the air as Tiamat's tail flicked dangerously. Oh no, that's not happening. Albion laughed. Oh. So, you do care. Tiamat crossed her arms. I just refuse to be left out. Issei exhaled. I don't care. Tiamat smirked. Then you won't mind if I tag along. With that, Drake and Albion turned into streams of energy, retreating back into their respective sacred gears. Tiamat, however, stepped up beside Issei, clearly intent on following whether he wanted her to or not. Vali just shook her head and walked with him. The journey to his home didn't take long, and soon, the familiar side of his mountain cabin came into view. Nestled near the edge of the mountain, the cabin was modest but sturdy, its wooden structure blending seamlessly into the surrounding wilderness. A serene lake stretched out before it, the crystal clear water reflecting the sky above. A waterfall cascaded into the lake from a nearby cliff, the sound of rushing water creating a tranquil backdrop. As he approached, he sensed the presence of others within. His golden eyes narrowed slightly as he opened the door. Inside, Kuroko was lounging on his couch, tail swaying lazily as she stretched. Took you long enough, Naya. She purred. Vali sat at the small wooden table, arms crossed, her expression unreadable. She barely spared him a glance as he entered. This was her idea. Kuroko grinned. Of course, it was. It's peaceful here. Perfect place to relax, don't you think? Crom Cruich leaned against the far wall, her golden eyes scanning the space. Unlike the others, she took a moment to truly observe her surroundings. Her gaze lingered on the sturdy wooden beams, the well-kept simplicity of the cabin, and the way the natural elements around it blended so perfectly. The lake, the waterfall, it was an ideal place to retreat. HMPH. Crom muttered, arms folded. I'll admit, this place is not bad. Kuroko's ears twitched. Oh. That almost sounded like a compliment, Naya. Crom rolled her eyes. Don't push it. Issei took a slow breath. He wasn't in the mood for this, but he wasn't about to start an argument either. Do whatever you want, I don't care. He muttered, walking past them and heading toward his room. Hey, don't just ignore us, Naya. Kuroko whined. Vali sighed. You're the one who brought us here. Deal with it. Kuroko huffed but didn't argue. Instead, she turned her attention back to Issei, who had already disappeared into his room, shutting the door behind him. Crom watched the closed door for a moment longer before scoffing. TCH. He really is something else. Vali glanced at her. You're still thinking about that fight, aren't you? Crom's tail flicked. Maybe. Kuroko's grin widened. Oh. Is that all you're thinking about? Crom shot her a glare. Shut up. Kuroko only giggled. Meanwhile, in his room, Issei sat on the edge of his bed, exhaling deeply. His solitude had been interrupted once again. Deciding to ignore the noise outside, he laid back onto his bed and allowed his exhaustion to finally take hold. The moment his head hit the pillow, sleep overcame him, pulling him into a deep slumber. Kuroko, noticing the opportunity, quietly slipped into his room and curled up beside him, draping an arm over his chest with a contented purr. Seeing this, Vali narrowed her eyes before scoffing, but after a moment of hesitation, she joined them as well, lying on the opposite side. Crom, not one to back down from a challenge, crossed her arms. TCH. Whatever. Then, she too climbed onto the bed, but instead of settling beside him, she boldly laid on top of Issei, resting her head against his chest. A soft glow then emerged from Issei's sacred gear as he unconsciously released Drake and Albion in their human forms. Drake stretched before yawning, his slick back red hair shifting slightly. Albion, a tall woman with long silver hair, smirked, taking one look at the scene before deciding to lay down as well. Looks like we don't have much choice. Drake muttered, before finding a comfortable spot. Albion chuckled. If Tiamat sees this, she'll kill you. Tiamat, who had also entered the room unnoticed, simply crossed her arms. Oh, I see how it is. Drake groaned. Don't start. Tiamat smirked. You're mine later. Issei, completely unaware of everything, simply continued sleeping, his breathing steady and calm. As silence filled the room, the group unknowingly found themselves sharing in his tranquility, the steady sound of the waterfall outside, blending into the quiet atmosphere of the cabin. Meanwhile, outside, Drake had quietly slipped away, stepping behind the waterfall where a hidden cave lay. The cavern shimmered with treasures and weapons from ages past, but what caught his eye most was an old egg, his egg, the one he had hatched from. He stared at it, lost in thought. Seeing this, Albion and Tiamat exchanged glances before smirking. Now's our chance. Albion whispered. Tiamat grinned. Oh, absolutely. Before Drake could react, the two dragonesses lunged, pushing him down with mischievous intent. A predatory grin appeared on Tiamat's face. It's time for you to repay your debt. Albion smirking. I've wanted to do this for a long time. Drake's eyes widened. Wait, what? A loud crash echoed through the cavern, followed by laughter and a deep sigh from Drake. The next day. A soft rustling sound stirred Crom from her sleep. She blinked groggily, golden eyes adjusting to the dim morning light filtering through the window. As she shifted, she realized something was off. The steady warmth beneath her was gone. Frowning, she sat up, glancing around the room. Hiroka and Vali had also stirred, their sleepy expressions quickly shifting to alertness as they noticed the same thing. Where is he? Vali muttered, rubbing her eyes before standing up. Hiroka stretched, her tail flicking behind her. He must have woken up early, Naya. Let's check outside. Crom silently followed as they stepped out of the bedroom and into the main area of the cabin. The scent of freshly cooked food filled the air, rich and savory, making her stomach tighten slightly in anticipation. The source of the aroma was immediately clear. Issei stood by the kitchen, his movements precise and effortless. He moved with silent grace, flipping something in the pan with a practiced wrist, his expression calm and focused. His long, dark hair was tied back, revealing sharp features and golden eyes that remained fixed on his task. The sound of sizzling echoed through the space, blending seamlessly with the peaceful ambience of the cabin. Hiroka grinned. Breakfast by Issei, my favorite. Vali leaned against the wall, watching with a knowing smirk. He always cooks like this. You get used to it. Crom, however, found herself watching more intently. This was unexpected. She had seen warriors, swordsmen, and powerful beings fight with skill, but seeing someone display such refined technique in something as simple as cooking was something else entirely. There was no hesitation in his movements, no wasted effort, only quiet efficiency and undeniable mastery. Her heart skipped a beat before she scowled at herself. TCH. Why does everything he does have to be so damn impressive? Still, she couldn't tear her eyes away. The way he plated the food with precision, the way his fingers moved as he balanced flavors, it was mesmerizing. If she didn't know better, she would have thought this was another form of combat, one he had mastered just as thoroughly as the blade. Issei, seemingly unaffected by their stares, finished preparing the plates and set them on the table. Eat. Hiroka was the first to react, practically pouncing on the food with a delighted purr. You never disappoint, Naya. Vali took a seat as well, nodding in satisfaction after taking a bite. Still as good as ever. Crom hesitated for only a second before sitting down. The first bite sent a pleasant warmth through her, and though she remained silent, a small part of her admitted this was incredible. Before she could say anything, the door opened, and Albion, Drake, and Tiamat entered. Albion stretched before smirking. Smells good. You actually cooked for us this time? Tiamat raised an eyebrow. Surprising, but I wouldn't complain. Drake huffed as he sat down. You know he's always been like this. He just doesn't say much about it. Issei remained quiet, eating his food with the same calm demeanor. The table soon became a lively scene, the sounds of eating and conversation blending together. Albion leaned back. So, what's next for you all? Vali crossed her arms. I don't know. Maybe some training. Hiroka grinned. Or maybe we should just stay here and make Issei cook for us every day, Naya. Crom scoffed. You're shameless. Hiroka winked. And you're just jealous. Crom rolled her eyes but didn't deny it. Tiamat watched Issei for a moment before smirking. You really are full of surprises. Cooking like this, fighting like that. What else are you hiding? Issei didn't answer, simply taking another bite of his food. Silence followed for a moment before Albion chuckled. That's just how he is. Vali sighed. Yeah. And somehow, we all ended up here with him. A comfortable silence settled over the group, the sound of the waterfall outside, blending with the soft clinking of utensils. Crom stole another glance at Issei before looking away, forcing herself to ignore the warmth in her chest. Damn it. This isn't fair. After a few minutes later, everyone finished eating their meal. As the last of the plates were cleared, Crom stood up, her gaze lingering on Issei. She had observed his cooking with a mix of admiration and frustration. His skill in the kitchen rivaled his prowess in combat. Need any help with the dishes? She asked, her voice softer than usual. Issei glanced up, offering a faint smile. I can manage, but if you insist, I won't turn down the company. Crom nodded and moved to the sink, her movements deliberate as she began washing the dishes. Issei joined her, handing over the cleaned items to be dried. The rhythmic sound of water and clinking dishes filled the space, creating a comfortable silence between them. After a few moments, Crom spoke again. You know, I never expected you to be so capable. In the kitchen, I mean. Issei chuckled softly. I had to learn something useful. Can't always rely on others to feed me. Crom smirked. I suppose that's true. They continued working side by side, the conversation flowing easily. As they finished drying the last of the dishes, Crom turned to face him, her expression serious. Issei. She began, her voice low. She hesitated, searching for the right words. Issei waited patiently, his golden eyes attentive. As the last dish was set aside to dry, Crom turned to Issei, her expression thoughtful. Issei. She began. I've noticed your exceptional skills in both combat and cooking. Who taught you? Issei offered a modest smile. I've had 2 mentors. Crom's eyes narrowed slightly. Kokushibo and Drake, correct? He nodded. Yes. Drake and I grew close over time, and Kokushibo. He was like a father to me. A brief flashback crossed Issei's mind. In his mental landscape, he stood before Kokushibo, the formidable swordsman with long, spiky black hair tied in a ponytail, his 6 eyes 3 sets with yellower eyes and red sclera focused intently on him. Kokushibo's voice, both stern and guiding, echoed as he demonstrated a sword technique, his movements precise and controlled. Issei mirrored the motions, feeling the weight of the blade and the depth of his mentor's experience. Returning to the present, Issei's gaze softened. Kokushibo imparted not just techniques, but discipline and purpose. His teachings went beyond the battlefield. Crom nodded, a hint of respect in her eyes. It's evident in everything you do. As they stood side by side, the gentle sounds of the waterfall outside mingling with the quiet of the cabin, a sense of mutual respect and understanding deepened between them. In that shared silence, an unspoken bond began to form, hinting at the possibility of something more. After finishing the dishes, Issei and Crom stepped outside the cabin to find their companions gathered. Tiamat, Drake, and Albion sat together on a sturdy wooden bench, engaged in quiet conversation. Nearby, Volley and Kuroka were seated side by side, sharing a light-hearted exchange. Crom joined the group, taking a seat beside Tiamat. Issei, however, moved a short distance away, unsheathing his sword. Issei. Volley called out, curiosity evident in her voice. What are you up to? Without pausing, Issei replied. Training. The group watched as he began a series of downward sword swings, each movement precise and controlled. Kuroka tilted her head, ears twitching. How many times do you plan to swing that thing, Naya? 1,000. Issei answered calmly, continuing his exercise. Eyes widened in surprise, except for Drake, who remained unfazed. Issei. Tiamat interjected. Why so many repetitions? Issei paused briefly, glancing over his shoulder. This is just a basic exercise to maintain form and build endurance. The others exchanged astonished glances, processing the intensity of his regimen. After completing his swings, Issei took a deep breath, centering himself. He then shifted his stance, preparing for a more advanced technique. Moon breathing. 10th form, he murmured to himself. Drilling slashes, moon through bamboo leaves. Channeling his energy, Issei executed the form, his blade creating a series of 3-layered crescent-shaped slashes that seemed to ripple through the air. The sheer force and precision of the attack left the onlookers in awe. As he concluded the demonstration, Issei sheathed his sword, exhaling slowly. The group watched in astonishment, except for Drake, who remained silent, fully aware of the true depth of Issei's training and the identity he concealed. Albion, observing from his seat, offered a rare compliment. Your technique is impressive, Issei. Tiamat nodded in agreement. Such precision and power. Issei glanced at them, determination evident in his eyes. Thank you, but it's not good enough. Without further ado, he resumed practicing the same form, each swing of his sword more precise than the last. As the group continued to watch, Drake remained silent, fully aware of the true depth of Issei's training and the identity he concealed. Inwardly, Issei thought, good, they don't suspect a thing. Unbeknownst to the others, Issei was hiding his true identity as Kokushibo. After their training together, the real Kokushibo had granted Issei permission to use his demon name, allowing him to carry on his legacy. Determined to perfect his technique, Issei continued his relentless practice, the weight of his concealed identity fueling his resolve. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the training ground, Issei continued his relentless practice. The air was thick with the sound of his blade slicing through the wind, each movement precise, calculated. His muscles burned with exertion, but he ignored the fatigue. He had to push further. He had to become stronger. Albion's voice echoed in Volley's mind. His movements are beyond what I expected. There's a refinement to his technique that suggests something more than just natural talent. Volley crossed her arms, watching intently. He's different. His discipline, his control. It's not normal. She narrowed her eyes. He's hiding something. Kuroka stretched lazily beside her. Does it really matter, Naya? He's strong. That's all that matters. Drake remained silent, though his gaze never left Issei. He alone knew the full truth. Issei wasn't training to refine his skills, he was doing this to maintain the illusion that he and Kokushibo were separate beings. Every swing, every movement was carefully calculated, not just for improvement, but to eliminate suspicion. If they believed Kokushibo and Issei were different people, his true identity would remain concealed. Tiamat finally broke the silence. Enough for today. You'll wear yourself down before a real fight. Issei stopped, his blade resting at his side. Sweat dripped from his brow, but his expression remained unreadable. Not yet. I haven't reached it. Reached what? Bali questioned, stepping closer. Issei's grip tightened on his sword. The level where nothing is out of reach. The group exchanged glances. He spoke with an intensity that left little room for argument. Even Vali found herself intrigued, though she quickly masked it. Kuroka smirked. You're obsessed, Naya. But I like it. Issei said nothing. He turned back to his training, his blade flashing under the dimming sky. Inwardly, he recalled his lessons under Kokushibo. The endless nights of training. The countless strikes. The pursuit of perfection. He would not stop. He could not stop. Because the moment he faltered, the truth of his identity would unravel. The next morning, Issei found himself in a vast bamboo forest, the towering stalk swaying gently in the morning breeze. He moved with purpose, each step barely making a sound against the soft earth. He was here for one reason. To test himself beyond his current limits. As he reached a small clearing, he exhaled deeply, closing his eyes. His sword left its sheath in a whisper, glinting under the dappled sunlight. Slowly, he transitioned into a stance, feeling the energy coursing through him. Drake's voice rumbled in his mind. This place. It's eerily silent. Be cautious. Issei remained still, attuning himself to the surroundings. And then, he felt it. A presence. Faint but deliberate. Someone was watching him. But the swift pivot, he slashed through the air, his blade meeting another in a shower of sparks. His eyes widened slightly as he took in the figure before him. A lone warrior, clad in dark robes, stood with his blade locked against Issei's. His expression was unreadable, but his aura radiated strength. Issei took a step back, lowering his weapon slightly. Who are you? The man's gaze bore into him before he finally spoke, his voice calm yet firm. A ghost of the past. One who seeks answers. Issei clenched his jaw. He could sense it. This man wasn't an ordinary swordsman. And he knew this battle was inevitable. The stranger moved first, his sword a blur. Issei barely parried in time, the force behind the attack making his arms tremble. He skidded back, narrowing his eyes. This opponent was no amateur. If I hold back, I'll lose. He exhaled sharply, his body beginning to change. His once normal pupils split into 6, glowing with an eerie golden light. Crimson markings crept across his skin, his form shifting as his power surged. His aura darkened, the air around him growing heavy with overwhelming bloodlust. Drake's voice rang in his mind. You're revealing too much. I have no choice. Issei muttered, his voice carrying a distorted edge. The stranger took a step back, clearly recognizing the transformation. So, this is your true self. Interesting. But the single step, Issei vanished from view, reappearing in an instant behind his opponent. The warrior barely had time to react before Issei's blade came crashing down, their clash sending shockwaves through the bamboo forest. Issei pressed forward, his strikes relentless, but the warrior dodged and parried with an almost unnatural grace. The air around them grew thick with heat, and suddenly, the stranger's blade ignited with an intense golden light. Without a word, he launched into a powerful slash, the flames following the arc of his sword like a crescent sun. Issei's eyes widened as he barely twisted away, feeling the searing heat graze his skin. Sun breathing. The stranger moved with perfect footwork, his attacks fluid, each step measured. The overwhelming force behind each strike forced Issei onto the defensive. Every swing of the opponent's blade felt like the sun itself was crashing down upon him. Issei gritted his teeth. So he wields the original breathing style. He knew he couldn't afford to take a single direct hit. Drawing upon his own mastery, he twisted mid-air, activating moon breathing. Third form. Loathsome moon, chains. Countless crescent blades shot forward, spiraling toward the warrior. But the stranger moved through them, his blade cutting apart the crescent arcs with ease. He closed the distance in an instant, bringing his blade down with crushing force. Issei barely managed to block, the sheer impact sending him crashing backward through several bamboo stalks. As he lay there, gasping for breath, the stranger's hooded robe fluttered in the wind, finally falling away. Issei's blood ran cold. The man standing before him was unmistakable. The scarred face, the unwavering golden eyes, the sheer presence he exuded. "YoriYanagami," Issei whispered, his voice hoarse. YoriYanagami looked down at him, his gaze calm yet firm. "You're strong," he acknowledged. "But not strong enough. You must at least be equal to your master, Kokushibo." Before Issei could respond, his vision blurred. Darkness consumed his consciousness. With a sharp gasp, Issei jolted awake, finding himself in his bed. His body ached, drenched in sweat. He stared at the ceiling, breathing heavily. The battle, the encounter. It had felt so real. And YoriYanagami's words echoed in his mind. Not strong enough. His grip tightened around his blanket. He needed to become stronger. No matter what it took. Issei's eyes snapped open, his breath ragged as he stared at the wooden ceiling above him. His body ached, the phantom pain of the battle still fresh in his mind. He lifted his hand, staring at his trembling fingers. I lost. Again. The battle replayed in his mind in excruciating detail. Every movement, every strike. It had all been precise, overwhelming. No matter how hard he pushed himself, he had been helpless in the face of that power. Even in his demon form, he had been completely outclassed. He clenched his fists, frustration gnawing at him. He had trained relentlessly, sharpening his techniques to perfection. Or so he thought. But this was proof that he still wasn't there yet. Drake's voice rumbled in his mind, steady and calm. You're awake. I take it you've realized your shortcomings. Issei exhaled sharply. TCH. As if I needed reminding. Slowly, he sat up, ignoring the soreness in his muscles. His body was heavy, but his mind was sharper than ever. He had tried to use that form, the one he had yet to fully master, yet it hadn't been enough. It still wasn't enough. He grit his teeth. He had thought he was progressing, that he was reaching new heights. But Yoriichi had shattered that illusion. If he couldn't control it, if he couldn't fully bring out its power, then what was the point? Drake remained silent for a moment before speaking again. You already know the answer. You're not there yet, but you will be. Issei closed his eyes, breathing deeply. He couldn't let this defeat shake him. If he wanted to stand at the pinnacle, to surpass even the greatest swordsman in history, he had to keep pushing forward. No matter how long it took. No matter how many times he failed. He would master it. He had to. That's it guys. Thanks for watching and supporting us. See you in the next part.